recording on my end, Jane.
Okay. I believe I'm recording. We shall see, Barwin. Right, if everybody's ready, Ian, over to you as chair.
Thank you, Jane. Can everyone hear me? I hope. Yes, good.
Yeah.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Ian White, Chair of the Governance and Audit Committee. I'd like to welcome you all today to the meeting, which is a virtual meeting. The meeting will be live streamed and recorded and will be available for viewing after the meeting. Should the live streaming fail, the meeting will continue and the recording will be available through the Council's website following the end of the meeting. I need to remind you that translation facilities are available, and for those attending remotely, which is everyone this morning, please choose your language of choice. For those wishing to speak, please raise your hand. And I'm hoping that Jane will keep me posted on anyone, because I can't see everyone on my screen at the moment.
I will do, Ian.
Okay, thanks very much. Thank you. Committee members are required to leave their camera on throughout the debate and when voting in order to maintain the integrity of the decision-making process. And if you do need to leave the meeting temporarily, please put a message in the chat function and let us know when you return. I expect everyone present and participating in the meeting to conduct themselves appropriately and be respectful to one another. When the debate is opened, I will ask committee members to speak and put their questions first, followed by any non-committee members. I don't want to stifle any debate, but members are reminded that any questions should be focused on the subject and to avoid repetition. And if I feel that the length of individual contributions are negatively impacting on the overall time for the discussion and becoming unmanageable, I will defer to the committee's rules of procedure, which limits contributions to 5 minutes. So can we move on to the agenda first? And Jane, do we have any apologies?
I do, yes. We have 3 apologies from councillors Andrew Wood, Stephen Price and Tom Montgomery.
Okay. Thank you very much. And does anyone wish to declare any interests today?
Mr. Nigel
No.
Rudd has his hand up.
Oh, okay.
Morning, Chair.
Good morning, Nigel.
I wish to declare an interest in respect of my membership of the GAC, Denbighshire Council, Chair.
Okay. Thank you, Nigel. I'm unaware of any urgent matters. Jane, are you aware of anything?
No urgent matters, Chair.
Okay, thanks, Jane. So moving on to item 4, which is the minutes of our last meeting. And these are in the pack to enable you to confirm accuracy, and they are not for debate. And we're aiming to approve the minutes of the meeting held on the 27th of November. Does anyone have any comment? No? No hands raised, Jane?
No hands, no.
No. Okay. Please, can I request a proposer in support of the minutes?
So Councillor Paul Lecoq is proposing, I believe.
Thank you, Paul. Oh, Nigel, you have your hand up?
Chair, I was going to ask for an update on a couple of matters arising from the minutes.
Yep.
Okay. The first one is in respect of minute 536. An update in respect of the reference to Betsy Cadwallader would be helpful, and the invitation to Cabinet members to attend future meeting of GAC would be helpful. The third item,
Yeah, and
can I just add a third item?
yes, indeed.
In respect of minute 537, an update as to how that matter was addressed at Cabinet, please. Thank you.
Okay, well, I had a meeting with Rune and Amanda. That was back end of last year. There was to be an update, and it was later agreed that we would indeed have an update at this meeting. I see, Penny, you have your hand up, so the plan indeed was that Penny and Cheryl Carlisle, Councillor Cheryl, would attend the meeting, or at least make a contribution at today's meeting to give us an update. That particular minute has led to quite a lot of debate and discussion as to a need for more clarity as to why we wanted that update. I have followed that up, and although there was not time after the pre-briefing meeting to update the work plan, it is the intention that in the May meeting there will be an update on partnership working, and particularly the BCU. But I'm grateful to see that Penny is on our call today, has her hand up, and indeed she was going to be asked to give us a brief update today anyway. So I'll let you speak, Penny.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you for asking the question. You've given a very rounded synopsis, Chair, of what the action is carried out to date. So, members, thank you so much for raising this. I'm sure you're all aware that this is historically a relationship that needs to be changed and altered to suit everyone's needs. I am working actively with Rhyn and Charlie to try to get more communication. Councillors and myself work very closely, and we're now working with Fleiss, and we do hope to meet with the Chief Exec. Members, this isn't something that's going to happen overnight. It literally is a work in progress, but can I assure you, I am putting 100% energy into improving this relationship, as is our Director of Services, Jenny. I don't feel as a Cabinet member I can turn that relationship round on my own. I know my philosophy is the more voices, the more noise you make. So working in an effective partnership, meeting with the Chief Exec, who is very active. I was talking to a group on Saturday. The Chief Exec actively goes round all departments to hear what needs to be corrected as opposed what is running along smoothly. So can I assure members, we are all working on this and we are all taking the lead. And I really hope that in a couple of, well, let's say a year, things will radically change. And I hope you can place your trust in us to do so. If you have any suggestions about how we can do it, but we are forging ahead. I can guarantee you that we are forging ahead with it. I hope that's all right. If you want to quiz me more, I'm more than happy for questions.
Okay, thank you, Penny. Nigel, do you have any further comment?
No, it's delighted. Thank you, through you, Chair, Councillor Penny, for coming back on that, because I know it is a shared interest and of importance to various sort of aspects of the council. And I fully recognise the need for a good working relationship to be sustained as part of that. And if there are issues that would benefit from GAC reviewing more closely at any point in time in the future, if you could give us a nod, Councillor Penny, on that, more than happy to ensure or prompt GAC to follow up on in association with yourselves. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Paul, for your kind words. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Penny. Now, prior to Nigel's question, we had a sponsor or a proposer for the minutes, Councillor Paul. Do we have a seconder, please?
Phil Brooks, I believe.
Thank you, Phil. And finally, can I ask for a show of hands in support of the accuracy of the minutes? Thank you.
Chair, I've momentarily lost my hand. Just wanted to comment on the corporate issues register and corporate risk register point that Nigel Rudd mentioned. The minute pertaining to the fact that the Governance and Audit Committee requested that I highlight to the Cabinet the committee's observation that the risk that the council does not set a balanced budget for 24-25. And they wanted me to set this out explicitly and have the corporate risk register contain that. So I just would like to confirm, Chair, that on Tuesday the 28th of November at Cabinet, we did discuss this at Cabinet, and it was suggested that the risk could include the negative impact associated with the issuing of a Section 114 notice whereby the council could not commit to any new expenditure. So I just want to assure Nigel that that was covered, and Cabinet did debate that. Thank you. Sorry, my Zoom's been updated and I just can't find the hands function, Chair. Apologies.
Thank you very much, Councillor Chris. I cannot find my hand function either, so don't worry. So we had a proposer and we had a seconder, and Jane, did we before Councillor Chris's contribution, did we have a unanimous vote?
Yes, everyone was supportive, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Jane. So the minutes are approved, and we can now move on to item 5 on our agenda to review the Governance and Audit Committee Forward Work Programme, which is on pages 11 to 14. And Sinead will take any questions that anyone has on that.
Sorry, Chair, before Sinead comes in, Phil Brooks, you've still got your hand up. Do you... Oh, it's gone. Okay.
Thank you.
Over to Sinead, I believe.
Does anyone have any questions?
Okay, happy to take any questions on the forward work plan. One thing I'd like to point out is that I'm in the process of arranging counter-fraud training for members of the GAC. I believe Sally sent out an email to you all on the 8th of February asking whether you are available on the 25th of March. It's a Monday at 10 o'clock, and your preference as to whether it's an in-person or online training. If you could please respond to Sally as soon as possible, would be greatly appreciated. I've got a trainer provisionally booked and would like to confirm as soon as possible. Thank you. Happy to take any other questions on the forward work plan.
Nigel?
Thank you, Chair. There is some interference online, so if I disappear, it's not because I'm uninterested. Chair, I asked before the meeting if Sally could ensure we had access to a document which I had sent to her, which is the Local Government Wales Measure 2011 legislative statutory requirements as updated in 2021 for terms of reference for the Governance and Audit Committee. I don't know whether Sally has sent that through to you, Jane, for sharing on screen.
I do have it, Nigel, so bear with me and I will
Thank
share
you.
the link you provided. Can
Thank
you
you,
all see
Jane.
that? Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
What I wanted to do here, Chair, was just to raise some concern that I have that the forward work programme for GAC in discussion with Sinead needs to be reconfigured, having regard to the actual contents of the measure. If you scan down, Jane, on that page, thank you, that's it. The first section of the measure talks about the Governance and Audit Committee, and the first statement in there is about the need to review and scrutinise the authority's financial affairs. And section B is to make reports and recommendation in relation to those financial affairs. And this section of the measure on governance and audit committees sits within part 6 of the Local Government Wales Measure 2011, which is headed Overview and Scrutiny. And I think it's important that we recognise this is not an expectation, this is a duty on the established governance and audit committees. Those A and B, in my view, what I would consider to be a block A type of report that needs to come in to agenda. Items C and D is about risk management, control and arrangements, and to report and make records. And those type of reports, in my view, Chair, come into what I consider to be a block B of reports. So it covers a number of issues which we do. It also performs assessment in relation to the annual self-assessment and any other performance assessment potentially that is undertaken by the council. The annual or the peer assessment I'm thinking of is the one that is required to be undertaken by an authority as a one-off sort of review, and that potentially needs to be reported back in or considered in terms of where it is reported. The E and DA and DB is fundamentally a process and the authority's ability to handle those complaints. A report that I consider to be in block C of what the work should be about. Block D is there sections E and F, which are about overseeing the internal, external financial statements prepared by the authority, which are, in my view, statement of accounts, annual finance and governance report, and annual governance statement. Those all come in my view, to block D on an agenda. Final to the next heading is about the local authority may confer on its governance and audit committee such other functions as the authority considers suitable to be exercised by such a committee. And within Conway, we clearly have that in relation, for example, to treasury management, external regulatory reports and progress made on recommendations in relation to that. The crucial bit under item 3 on that page states clearly that the GAC, and about the GAC, is that it is for the Governance and Audit Committee to determine how to exercise its functions. So in doing that, I think that what we probably need to do is to ensure that the future work programme for the committee reflects blocks A, B, C, D, and E to ensure that we comply with the duty to perform as set out within this measure, and that when questioned about that in terms of what is the role of the GAC, how we can show we have complied with that measure in terms of support of the work of the authority. And that's important because SIPFA, in a review of difficulties and common problems faced by authorities that ended up issuing a Section 114 notice, did express concerns. One of the issues on that was about governance and the lack of understanding about what the role of the GAC was, and that function and role as it was not understood led to a serious lack of oversight within the audit and governance committees, not exercising their functions as a contributory role in respect of the then subsequent issue of Section 114 notices. So I think it's important, particularly in this context, that we ensure we do and are seen to do what is required as an effective GAC. And when you look at the forward work programme as currently listed on the agenda, in my view, it does not currently adequately cover blocks A, B, C, D, and E. It covers a number of those items, but it I think needs reworking to try and ensure from a GAC perspective that when asked, have we complied, do we comply, and how we complied, we can evidence the response to that. So I flag that as being an area of concern. It's not one that we can necessarily, nor would I wish to necessarily debate how we adjust, if we need to adjust, the current work programme. I think it's a matter that might ideally be delegated to officers in consultation with yourself, Chair, and the Vice Chair, potentially, to revisit the work programme in order to ensure compliance with the Local Government Wales Measure 2011. And that's what I would formally propose to the committee, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Nigel, for your comments. We will bear them in mind when we come to
Thank
review the
you,
forward work plan
Nigel.
next.
Sorry, Shauna, do you
Sorry,
want to
Shauna,
repeat that?
Yes, just want to thank Nigel for his comments, and we will bear them in mind when we next review the forward work plan. Thank you.
Councillor Paul.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to second Nigel's proposal and ensure that those detailed discussions and consultations take place. And if you could initiate those, Chair, that would, I think, reassure us all. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Paul. Can I just mention that I have again had a conversation with Rune and Amanda Hughes with regard to this, and I do already have a commitment that I, as chair, will be involved before there are any final decisions taken. That discussion is all around the roles of scrutiny committees and the GAC, and certainly Nigel's input there of the last 5 minutes is very helpful in that regard, I believe. Amanda, you have your hand up, but you're on mute.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. Yeah, I know we've had some debate around some of these issues before, and obviously I'm more than happy that we look at that. But I would also just reiterate, particularly in relation to some of the financial management issues, and I'll quote specifically the SIPFA Guide for Audit Committees, Practical Guidance for Local Authorities, where it clearly says that audit committees in local authorities in Wales and in combined authorities are required to review and scrutinise the authority's financial affairs. Robust arrangements for financial control, understanding financial risk and longer-term financial planning will provide assurance to the committee. The review of financial statements also supports this objective. Care should be taken to not overlap with financial scrutiny. Tasks such as budget monitoring should not be undertaken by the committee. So I'm just making the point that, I think there's a grey line in the context of financial scrutiny in particular, and clearly it's appropriate that you as an audit committee are assured as to the overall arrangements that we have and, the adequacy of those and the effectiveness of them. But clearly it isn't appropriate that suddenly this becomes the Finance and Resources Scrutiny Committee, which has its own functions, and we've had a range of debate about that. I'm more than happy that we continue to finesse that understanding, but we really must be careful that this committee isn't seeking to try and play the role of another committee. With that in mind, however, I absolutely recognise, and I was of that view myself anyway, that there is need to strengthen some of the information and some of the consideration by this committee, and clearly at a previous committee I brought quite a detailed report setting out the whole gamut of our arrangements, and at this committee I have brought a presentation which I'll go through later, which again gives this committee sight of what we're doing in a more overall control perspective in terms of managing that risk about balancing our budget. So I welcome or more than happy obviously to have further discussion about the finessing around that grey area, but I really do need to put a marker down that it isn't the audit committee's job to be the Finance and Resources Committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Amanda. Does anyone else have any comments? No? Okay, so if I can just summarise, I think we have an agreement that as a minimum, myself as chair and Councillor Stephen as vice chair will be further involved in any upcoming conversations around the roles of scrutiny and the GAC, and that we will work with you, Amanda, to further clarify the grey dividing line between those committees. And I think we should probably include further discussion on this in our next meeting in May, and add that to the forward work programme. And in the meantime, we, as Sinead has volunteered, we will have a look at the content of that forward work plan. Noting that as part of the minute, can I ask for a proposer? Jane, do we have?
Nigel Rudd is proposing, Chair.
Thank you, Nigel. And a seconder?
Councillor Paul Lecoq.
Councillor Paul. Okay, thank you very much. And can I ask for a show of hands, please? Is it unanimous, Jane? I can't see everyone on my screen.
Is there anyone against? Can we just ask the question, or is anyone abstaining? Bill, are you in support? Your hand's up again. I believe that's been carried, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much, Jane. Okay. So we can now move on, I think, to item 6A on our agenda, which is the detailed audit plan from Audit Wales, which is pages 15 to 36 in your pack.
Thank you very much, Chair. Hi, good morning, everyone. And just
Good morning.
Hello. Just to introduce myself again, I'm Gareth Lucy, Audit Manager, Financial Audit Manager from Audit Wales, with responsibility for delivering our audit work here. So this is just to introduce our detailed audit plan for 2022-23. Members may well question the fact why we're bringing a plan for 2022-23 in February of 2024. So I'll just give a little bit of context in terms of how we've arrived at this document at this stage, and then just run through some of the key details. So earlier in 2023, we presented to you an outline audit plan. So that summarised some of the high-level details of our work programme for the year to come at that point. So that's just summarised some of the really broad key details, such as who the team might be, broad thinking in terms of timings, etc. But at that stage, we had to keep it as an outline because there were delays in certifying the 2021-22 accounts across the board in Wales. There were a couple of significant technical matters that arose in the audit of that year's accounts, which meant we didn't certify those accounts until very late in the day. And also for 2022-23, we have a new auditing standard coming in, ISA 315, a really fundamental reform of how we perform our financial audit work going forward. And that requires much more detailed risk assessment, which in turn then needs to directly drive our audit work in financial audit. So ultimately, due to those two factors, the fact that our planning was delayed and the fact that we needed that planning to be completed before we could present to you our final audit risks, we had to basically just hold off presenting this detailed audit plan to this point. But now that planning work's been completed, and now we present to you our detailed audit plan. So really, from a financial audit perspective, it just summarises the audit risks that we've identified from the planning stage, so sets them out in detail, just for members' attention. So ultimately, those are our key areas of focus that will drive our audit work this year. Not the only areas that we will be working on, but just some of the key areas that we'll be looking at in detail. Also summarises other key details, such as our proposed fee estimate for the year. So that's already been sort of summarised at a high level before, but the figures are set out in detail there for you now. And also the timings of when we'd expect to complete our work. So our audit work is ongoing now. We'd expect to complete our work during March, which will then leave us ample time to present the final accounts and our closing audit report to the May GNAC meeting, the next meeting in the schedule. No particular changes to flag up on the performance audit side, Chair. That's all as was presented before, really. So no details there. And hopefully the document, other than that, is relatively self-explanatory, although I'm happy to take any questions that the members of the committee may have.
Okay, thank you, Gareth. Does Councillor Paul?
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, Gareth. Can I ask what may appear quite a naive question, but what public participation does the Audit Office have in drawing up these detailed audit plans for local authorities in Wales?
Thank you, Councillor Paul. In terms of public participation, I mean, ultimately what these reports are, or these plans rather, are produced locally for each audited body. So ultimately just involves consultation with that audited body that we're presenting the plan to. So will involve discussion with key officers, review of key documents, ongoing liaison with that audited body, consultation in terms of or consideration rather in terms of risks arising for particular sectors, so maybe wider of audit bodies in particular. Other than that, there's no public consultation as such in establishing that plan, other than I'd say in terms of determining the audit fee for the year. So in terms of establishing that fee, we're required to have a fee scheme approved by the Senedd, and that fee scheme is subject to public consultation as well each year. So that's the one element of the plan that is subject to public consultation. Other than that, it's really just sort of a local consideration of the risks arising and relevant information to plan our work.
Thank you for that, Gareth. I mean, that sort of confirms my understanding and my, in a sense, concern to some extent, because I'm very conscious that my residents, the public, raise issues with me, and then I'm not persuaded that the Audit Office is fully over those issues. And of course, some of those issues inevitably would slip through any system, I suspect. You can't be totally over issues. But and I'll take your advice on this, Chair, because I'm quite happy to write on these issues to Gareth if you judge it to be more appropriate. But there were 4 topics that, if I reflected on my residents' representations to me, I would definitely want the Audit Office at least to have on their, I won't even say agenda, but on their sort of view when they're looking at our accounts and the like. Now, I'm happy to just sort of record them here, but if you judge it more appropriate, Chair, I'm happy also to write to Gareth with those issues. So I'll just be advised by you first of all.
Well, I find it a bit a little difficult to say at the moment when you've not defined the or explained the 4 items. But at the same time, I'm aware to the fact that we don't want to spend too much time on discussing each of those. But
can I give you an example?
Minimum, if you...
Yeah, can I give you an example? A key issue which has been flagged up by me and is clear to other councillors and to officers, senior officers, is the procurement and management of contracts. And I'm aware we'll deal with this elsewhere on the agenda. And Sionnad's given me clear direction that I can't raise the detail of any of these issues today. But in terms of school transport and social care, I remain, in the nearly 2 years now since I was elected, remain very concerned about our procurement and management of contracts in those 2 areas. Now, I would want in this next audit period for those to be further looked at by the Audit Office, because I think they are of significant concern. Now, I've got 3 other topics, similar, but maybe not as profound, but similar issues, which I would like when this audit plan is operated, for at least consideration. You know, I accept people's professional judgment, whether it's a priority or not at the present time, and all of that. But I would certainly, on behalf of my residents, like to put those matters on their agenda or their overview, or as Amanda uses the word, they're cited about them, because my greatest concern is that there is silence or secrecy on these issues, and that's what my residents are concerned about, I think.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Paul. I see I have 3 hands up, but can I, as chair, just say that the one example you've given, Councillor Paul, I would have said is local, and I would have imagined that our own internal audit department would cover that, and there have already been 2 audits undertaken in the area of contracting and procurement. But that's just where I stand at the moment. But Amanda, can I invite you to speak? With 3 hands
yes.
up, I think.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I guess I was probably going to make that same point, Ian, in the sense of, you know, I understand, Councillor Paul, your desire potentially for certain audit work to be undertaken, but I think the first port of call for that would be for our own internal audit function to undertake that work. You know, I'm not of the view that we lack the capability or the capacity to direct internal audit to what we believe to be the highest risks for us as an authority. You know, you know, Audit Wales's fees, as we can see in the plan, are quite hefty, and I'm not quite sure. Therefore, we should be asking, you know, contracting external audit to do bespoke work for us that we have our own internal audit department to do. Having said that, you know, I am sure Gareth, and I'm sure he'll come in and say that when they're performing their risk assessments, you know, they'll obviously be looking at areas that they believe from an external audit perspective are relevant for them to get assurance on, and the work that they might want to do. But as I say, I think any internal work that we believe should be done because we believe it's at risk, I think internal audit is the first port of call. Thank you.
Thank you, Amanda. Sinead, can I?
Yes, certainly. Just Councillor Paul, I just want to reiterate the fact that this subject wasn't on the agenda. Yes, we are undertaking a significant piece of work at the moment. As I explained, it can't be discussed as yet. But just to draw attention to the fact that, from my understanding, there have been no complaints made through the channel about this area. So I suggest if your citizens have got complaints to make, then they go through the correct channel. Thank you.
Thank you, Sinead. Gareth?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, just to come back with a couple of points on what Councillor Paul raised there. So, in terms of you know, correspondence from members of the public, we do receive those ourselves as well. So, yeah, absolutely happy, Councillor Paul, if you wanted to write to us, we invite correspondence from members of the public or interested parties about all our audited bodies, because that also helps frame our risk assessment in terms of how to plan our work ahead. So that does form part of the framework as well. Another key element as well is we hold a joint assurance and risk assessment workshop with senior officers and senior councillors, and that'll be coming up, I think, in Conwy in the next couple of weeks, which again forms a key element of shaping that audit plan for the coming year. So that'll obviously be looking ahead to the next financial year. You know, so all those discussions are also really helpful in terms of framing that discussion. So hope that adds some additional context there, Chair.
Thank you, Gareth. Councillor Paul, you're is that your hand up again? You're on mute, Councillor Paul.
Apologies, Chair. I just want to come back on Sianed's comments there. My best understanding from the correspondence that I've received on these procurement and contract issues is that at least one of those residents, he's confirmed to me, has been pursuing a stage 1 and stage 2 complaint with the appropriate complaints officer, Janice Manley. So I just wanted to, well, not counteract what Sianed's saying, but if Sianed's saying she's not cited on those complaints, I'm flagging them up to her this morning, because that is my understanding, at least from one resident, and maybe two, but at least one resident has sent me correspondence in relation to those complaints. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Paul. I mean, obviously, I have no knowledge of the detail of that, but in terms of the context, I have a distinct feeling that this is something that should be handled locally, and certainly should not be sort of directed towards Gareth. But I will take advice on that. But that's my personal view. Councillor Dilwyn, I see your hand up. Oh, you're on mute.
Yeah, I've just put it back now. Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'd just like a little bit of clarity on this, really, because it's something that has concerned me in the past. And going back to something that Amanda said earlier about the line between scrutiny and audit, and what we're hearing now is possibly trying to have a second bite at scrutiny rather than audit. I just want clarity on that, or if it's just my perception.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Dilwyn. Amanda, do you have anything to say on that?
Yeah, sorry, apologies, Councillor Dillon. Sorry, in terms of that line, you're talking specifically about complaints now. Sorry, you're on mute. You're on mute, sorry, Councillor Dillon.
Yes, it's around what's been mentioned now by Councillor Paul. And is it, you know, I would have thought that that is an internal scrutiny issue, which it has been raised, that scrutiny. And, you know, I was under the impression that our internal audit was dealing with it, and that it was a work in progress type of thing.
Yeah, that absolutely would be my understanding, and as you say, to the extent that there's internal audit work being undertaken, you know, when that's completed, that will come, you know, to this committee as normal. But yes, in terms of the detailed, as you say, it's been brought up in other places and looked at in other places. So, you know, Sianed, I'm sure, can come in and comment. But yeah, I think it'll come to us through or come to this committee, should I say, through an internal audit report, won't it? Is that right?
That's the appropriate, yeah.
Okay, thank you, Amanda. Thank you, Councillor Dilwyn. Sianed, your hand's up.
Yes, just going back to Councillor Paul's comments about the complaints. I am aware that there was one complaint made to the relevant department, but it hasn't been forwarded on to the complaints officer.
Okay, Councillor Paul, you're on mute.
So you're saying, Sinead, if I understand you correctly, that a complaint was made to a specific department, but that complaint wasn't then forwarded on to the complaints officer?
From my understanding, yes. But, you know, this is why I didn't want to discuss this today. The investigation is complete and is currently being reviewed. And it was not on the agenda for today's meeting. No. And this is why I didn't want to discuss it.
Exactly.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Sinead. Councillor Paul. Oh. Okay, Gareth, thank you very much. I actually have a couple of queries, if you don't mind. They may just be administrative, though. And so I'm struggling a bit to read my notes because Jane kindly told me that I had to pull my curtains because no one could see my face. So, but now I can't read my notes. But in your there is something in the plan about commissioning and contract management, but then in the detail there is no mention of contract management. Am I correct in thinking that contract management is not part of your plan going forward? I think that was on page, let me see. Oh no, I don't have a note of the page. It's in the performance audit section, and it talked about commissioning and contract management, but then in the detail there was no mention of contract management, and it's my understanding that that is not part of your plan. Is that correct?
That's correct, Chair. Sorry, I'm just looking for. I'd made a correction on page 29 of the report to take out the words contract management, but I can see they have been left in the plan on page 22. So, yes, apologies for that. Ultimately, in terms of scoping the work, it was felt more appropriate to to keep that to commissioning, just because there's been a couple of recent changes in legislation that would make any review of contract management difficult at this time. So, yes, apologies for that, Chair.
Okay, thanks. And I had one other point on risks, which I think is page. It's on the area of finance. It talks about significant financial statement risks. Now, there was 2 items mentioned in the summary, but then the actual detail itself is only actually talking about, I think it's unusual journal entries and accounting estimates. So I wasn't sure whether the 2 items mentioned, which were significant financial statement risk and management override.
Yeah. So on that page,
22, I found. So that's fine if they're seen as sort of areas of focus, but then the detail really only talked about significant financial statement risk.
Yes, yeah. Ultimately, Chair, what's happened there on page 22 is I can see that the heading has actually become another bullet point. So the heading should be significant financial statements risks, and then there is one item which is management override, which is then followed up, I think, on page 24. And that's the risk of management override of systems and controls. That's a mandated risk from auditing standards. So every single audit that is performed under auditing standards has to include that as a significant risk. it can't be rebutted, replaced, removed, anything like that. So so that's just some context in terms of why that's been included, Chair.
Okay, thank you. And if I may, just one other item on 315, the new sort of legislation. It talks about areas that, well, the question in my mind is, will they be looked at or may they be looked at? Because the word that comes across each time is may. Do you know the part that I'm referring to?
Is this in terms of the other areas of focus, Chair?
Yes.
Well, ultimately, that's will as opposed to may. So I'm just trying to track down the word may. I can't immediately see it, but ultimately they are audit risks that have been identified through the planning process, and the audit will be focusing on those areas.
Okay. Thank you. Dave, you have your hand up?
Yeah, just a question for Gareth, just a quick one. Page 30 refers to certification of grant claims and returns. The ones you list there, presumably they have to be done by external audit, do they, rather than internal audits?
Yes, that's correct. Yes, so it's a required certification by us as external auditors.
Yeah, okay. There's none that you do, which we could do.
No, there may well be a number of other grant returns as well, and Sean Ed might confirm that, which internal audit might certify themselves, but those are the ones that we're required to do so as external audit.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, are there any other questions or comments?
I don't believe so, Ian.
No. Okay. So thank you, Gareth.
Thank you, Chair.
So we're being asked to. Hello, sorry.
Please continue, Ian.
So
Gareth
can
was just
I ask
you.
for? All right. Okay. Sorry. So can I? We're being asked to vote to note the report. Please, can I ask for a proposer? Thank you, Councillor Dillwyn. And a seconder, please. Thank you, Phil. And finally, a show of hands.
Can I ask if there's anyone
think that-
against, Chair? Anyone abstaining? Councillor Paul, are you against? Sorry, you're on mute.
No, I'm for.
Okay. So is anyone against?
Thank you, Councillor Paul.
Or anyone abstaining? No, that's carried, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Jane. Now, can we move on to item 7A, which is a report on the internal audit performance from April 23 to December 2023. And I think you're taking this item, Keith?
Yes, myself. Yeah, good morning. Yeah, this is the internal audit progress report for the first 3 quarters of the year to the end of December, which is submitted in compliance with the public sector internal audit standards and the terms of reference of the Governance and Audit Committee. The report analyses the performance and the progress for the first 3 quarters and is supported by appendices A to E. If I can take you to Appendix A initially, which is the schedule of performance indicators for the year. You'll see the first one there, 65% of the audit plan has been completed to the end of December, and that includes 5 jobs that were at the draft report stage at that point. Number of audits is at 34, which includes 7 follow-ups, National Fraud Initiative, 2 special investigations and 3 contract final accounts. 100% of clients responded as satisfied. Percentage recommendations accepted is at 98%. That's 83 out of 85 of our recommendations. There was a couple of recommendations in the cyber resilience audit whereby management argued that their current procedures that were in place were adequate. Percentage implementation of critical major recommendations is at 71%. That's 5 out of 7 of the recommendations made. There was a major recommendation in the procurement and the parent paying school meals arrears audits, which were considered to be work in progress at the follow-up stage. Percentage audits completed within planned time is 81%. This is against the target of 75%. Directly chargeable is at 63%, and the average actual cost is at 222. Number of audit staff is at 6.3. As I'm sure you're aware, a new auditor commenced in June, so we increased the full-time equivalent from 5.3 to 6.3 at that point. Appendix B is a schedule of the audit reports completed in the year. You'll see the top two there, procurement and cyber resilience, which were carried forward from 22-23. Obviously, you'll also see there the cyber resilience, the 18 of the 20 recommendations were accepted, and there was limited assurance. 15 audits have been completed to the 3 quarters. And I suppose the one to highlight there is the housing support grant, which made 14 recommendations and a limited level of assurance. As I mentioned, there was 5 draft reports at the end of December, and there was also 5 work in progress at that point. Food safety, housing benefit overpayments, Welsh Government Post-16 funding, WRU, RGC matches, and as we mentioned previously, home to school transport was work in progress also. Appendix C is a schedule of follow-ups. You'll see there that 7 have been completed and 1 was work in progress, education Chromebooks. Direct payments, application controls, SIMS, social care commissioning and Yscol St Elfod have been revised as high assurance. Corporate procurements and parent pay school meals arrears were revised from limited to satisfactory, and the GDPR follow-up remained as satisfactory, and the second follow-up has commenced. You'll also notice there that the Venue Cymru catering and the job evaluation follow-ups are scheduled to be undertaken before the end of the year. Appendix D is a schedule of the special investigation work undertaken in the year. National Fraud Initiative has just been the 1 day for the upload of data. 25 days on a social care special investigation, whereby there was disciplinary hearing in October and the officer was dismissed. There was also some work in social care on a GDPR, 11 days. And based on the investigation's findings, the responsible head of this service decided that there was no case to answer and there was no breach in GDPR. Appendix E is a schedule of final accounts. The first 2 have been issued, reported previously. And the third one is the Llandudno Junction flyover. We've reported there an underspend of 69,408, which is primarily due to a change in the traffic management, which impact on the scope of the works. I'd like to refer you to paragraph 5.1, which is Councillor Chris's endorsement of the report. And the recommendation is in 2.1 that members are asked to consider and provide comment on the assurance provided to the Governance and Audit Committee regarding the progress and performance of the service in the first 3 quarters of the year. And I'll happily answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Keith. Councillor Paul. You're on mute, Councillor Paul.
Apologies, Chair. I've got 2 specific questions. One in respect to Appendix B, internal audit reports, and the housing support grant report, which I suspect all members of the committee felt discomfort in reading. My concern about this, and I did flag this up at the recent service performance review, but I want it on the public record in this meeting, My concern primarily about this report was I would call it our alert and escalation methodology, because when I questioned this at the service performance review, it was confirmed, if I understood it right, that the problems really arose because people weren't fully alerted or over the fact that 3 members of staff were likely to leave fairly quickly. So a lot of the work that they would have done wasn't done. And that's why we had that limited assurance report coming to us. So again, my specific question is our alert and escalation methodology that we presently use robust? My second question is in relation to the special investigations Appendix D. And again, there, my concern is it must have been a very complicated case, because one officer on the disciplinary case in social care was tied up, if we understand it, for 5 weeks' work on that, 25 days. And that seems to me to be very concerning. Now, obviously, Shona will tell us that we can't go into any of the detail of that, but obviously 5 weeks' work on that special investigation, well, it just seems excessive to me, but I'd certainly want to flag it up in this committee. Thank you.
So shall I take the housing support grant one first? Yeah, obviously in that case, there are 3 members of staff in that section, obviously managing and controlling a £10 million grant. And like you say, within the space of 3 or 4 months, the 3 members of staff that are responsible all left. There were procedures put in place. Obviously, somebody from corporate finance, principal accountant, was made responsible for completing the finance claims to make sure that they were completed accurately and in time. So there were provisions put in place, but obviously generally issues with contracts and that keeping them up to date did slip during 22-23. But I can assure the committee that things are in place now to ensure that by the time we do the audit in the December of 24, that things will have improved.
Thank you, Keith.
In terms of the 25 days, obviously that was a very complicated special investigation that went on over 6, 7, probably 8 months, more than one person involved in the investigation, and 25 days, it's quite easy for a special investigation to read 25 days with the level of complexity that was in that special investigation.
Thank you, Keith. Councillor Cheryl.
Thank you very much for that, Chair. Apologies, my connection is really poor as well. In terms of the HSG issue, as Chair of FROSC, I knew nothing about this whatsoever until Councillor Paul flagged it in the SPR last week. And I'm quite concerned about that. Something clearly very major has gone on, and the chair of FROSC knew nothing about it, and it hasn't surfaced for a year. So I'm extremely concerned about that. And I wondered if maybe outside of this committee, I could speak to someone and find out why this is so. So thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Councillor Cheryl. We'll note that in the minutes.
I think it may be an idea, Councillor Cheryl.
Thank you very much, Chair. That'd be much appreciated.
Sorry, Councillor Cheryl, I think it'd probably be a good idea if I send you a copy of the audit report that was issued in December, and then we can discuss it after.
Lovely, thank you, Keith.
Amanda?
Yeah, I was just going to come in and just say, I think, Councillor Cheryl, what would also be useful, I think, is for us to consider whether, and I don't have a view because I'm not cited on the detail, although I have seen it in the past, whether it would have been appropriate or not for Finance and Resources to have known about it, because clearly, you know, day in, day out, you know, there's all sorts of, you know, hundreds of thousands of transactions that happen within the authority, and clearly, you know, it's about bringing appropriate matters to the attention of democracy. Now, it may well have been appropriate in this instance. I don't have a view, as I say, but I think we need to explore what and if should have come to FROSC in relation to the specific issue. I don't think, you know, routinely, just because a report has got a limited assurance on it doesn't mean that we would then take it to another committee outside of audit committee. So as I say, I'm absolutely open-minded on it, but I think we need to just explore what exactly may or may not have gone anywhere else, if you know what I mean.
Thanks, Amanda.
Okay, so we will, as a minimum, note in the minutes that there's concern, and that Keith will forward a copy of the report to Councillor Cheryl, and we'll follow up accordingly after that.
Yeah, the audit report would have been issued to obviously the leader, the cabinet member, and the chair and vice chair of the responsible overview and scrutiny committee, which I don't think was, in this respect, was finance. It would have been, I'm not sure which one it went to, but I can check on that. But it's gone to the appropriate people initially.
Okay, thanks, Keith. Can I invite any other comments or?
There's
Nothing
no
else?
one else, Ian. No one with their hands up.
Okay. So we've been asked to consider and provide comment, which we have done. So please, can I ask for a proposer in support of this report? Thank you, Dave. And a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Gareth.
Oh, right.
And finally, can I ask for a show of hands in support? Thank you. Is there anyone against? And anyone's abstaining? No, I think that's unanimous, is it, Jane?
That's carried, Chair. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you very much, everyone. So moving on to item 7B, which is the internal audit self-assessment 2023-24. Sinead, you're taking this item?
Yes, thank you, diolch. Before I begin, apologies, my internet speed isn't the best, so if there are issues, let me know and I'll turn my camera off. This report details the internal audit's 23-24 self-assessment. As you are aware, it is statutory requirement for internal audit to work in conformance with proper audit practices. The public sector internal audit standards and the SIPFA local government application note are mandatory in nature and applicable to various parts of UK public sector, including local government. Can you hear me? The standards are intended to promote further improvement in the professionalism, quality and effectiveness of internal audit across the public sector. They reaffirm the importance of robust, independent and objective internal audit arrangements to provide senior management and yourselves as the Governance and Audit Committee with key assurances they need to support in managing the organisation and in producing the annual government statement. A checklist has been developed to satisfy the requirements set out in the standards for periodic self-assessments and externally validated self-assessments as part of the Quality Assurance and Improvement Programme. We have completed the best practice checklist as our annual assessment for 23-24, and it is included in Appendix A. It evidences that the service is now fully compliant against 99.6 of the 305 individual requirements. The results are also summarised in Table 1 in the report. The one area of partial conformance is in respect of Standard 1130, independence and objectivity, as I have responsibility for the corporate procurement function. The standards require that any assurance engagements in areas over which the head of service also has operational responsibility are overseen by someone outside the internal audit activity. Objectivity and independence are provided by the operational management of the service being delegated to the audit manager, and any such engagements being overseen and the reports signed by the Strategic Director of Finance and Resources. The arrangements that Conwy have in place in relation to independence and objectivity are commonplace across Wales, and the authority is comfortable that these arrangements provide adequate safeguards. For members' information, corporate complaints and information governance will be transferring to my section as of 26th of February, and similar mitigating controls will be implemented to ensure independence and objectivity in these instances too. The standards introduced require for the external assessment of all internal audit services at least once every 5 years. An external assessment of the service was completed by the head of Regional Audit Service, and the report confirming that the service generally conforms with the standards and the Code of Ethics was submitted to yourselves last February. The external assessor made suggestions in the report for strengthening arrangements where conformance is already achieved. These are shown in the report along with our response as internal audit. Going back to the recommendations on page 50, members are requested to consider the self-assessment attached in Appendix A in terms of areas of full and partial conformance with the standards, and agree that the current area of partial conformance does not significantly impact the service's ability to demonstrate overall compliance. Members are also asked to consider and note the results of the internal audit self-assessment 23-24. Happy to take any questions. Diolch.
You're on mute, Ian. Over to you.
Yeah. Thank you, Sianed. Yes, I will. Paul? Councillor Paul, you're on mute.
Thank you. Shonid's obviously referred to this in her presentation, but I just want to raise my own concerns about this. This is item 68 on the self-assessment, which is this issue of potential of conflicts of interest between audit and corporate procurement. And fully understand, I think I fully understand what Sianed said about how this is managed. and how the sign-off eventually goes to the Strategic Director of Finance, Amanda. The reason I'm still not comfortable with this, and I was trying to put myself in the position of officers in either section of this, whether in audit or in procurement, on a day-to-day operational basis, with these different management supervision arrangements, in a sense, and maybe those people who are more professionally involved in this on a day-to-day basis would tell me, well, this sort of thing happens in other local authorities as well, and we are comfortable with that, and we're clear in our own minds of where the public's interest lies in this. But I still feel somewhat uncomfortable with it. And I'm not sure what I can be told to be further reassured that presumably, again, the audit office, the Welsh Government Audit Office, is over this, is cited in this, and presumably they're comfortable in it. But I still personally struggle with it a bit. And I'd like that minuted, please.
Okay, Councillor Paul, we will minute that. We will also minute the response from Amanda.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Paul. You know, I understand the concern you're raising, and I think in an ideal world, and if you go back 20 years, you had heads of internal audit that were absolutely, completely and utterly independent of any service function that delivered elsewhere within the council, because obviously in an ideal world, an auditor would always be absolutely independent of anything. I guess the realities of local government finances over the last couple of decades has meant that in all authorities, there's no longer the ability to afford the luxury of that absolute independence in the context of the head of internal audit. And I would just stress in that context, it is literally the head. So it is Sioned alone who has line management responsibility for procurement and line management responsibility for audit separately. So there's no overlap in any way, shape or form between the rest of the audit team and the procurement team. They absolutely are 100% independent and remain independent of any function across the authority. But in the context of Sioned's role, or the head of internal audit's role, you know, it is important that that role is at a seniority within the organisational management structure, that it has appropriate access to the chief executive, to the senior leadership team, to the audit committee, and is unfettered in that position. But therefore, you know, the realities of the financing and the realities of other things mean that actually that person then has to pick up some other line management responsibilities. Now, within Conwy, that has been in relation to procurement, and actually I think some of the future, the management changes that are coming in on the back of the new housing head of housing strategy also mean that a couple of other minor, not unimportant things, but minor in terms of the amount of people involved, are also moving over to Sioned. So, you know, the reality is we don't have the luxury because of the finances to have that 100% independent role. Having said that, we are acutely aware of the need for that appropriate independence and for internal audit in its functions to be unfettered in its activity in relation to audit of procurement, and therefore that continues and is led by Keith in his role as the internal audit manager, and he therefore reports directly to me in relation to that, so that Sioned has no influence over that work, the scope of it, the remit of it, any form of attempt to limit that work in any way, shape or form. And certainly, when I first arrived in the authority, I was conscious that, sorry, apologies, my phone was going. I was certainly conscious of the need to do work on procurement in the audit programme, and in fact, in the last couple of years, there's been quite a lot of internal audit work done in relation to procurement in recognition of that need. So I can't, I guess, remove your concern in absolute terms, but I can give you absolute assurance that we are attempting, or we have sought to put Chinese walls in place, or as it were, to make sure that isn't in any way, shape or form hindered. We have actually discussed it. I don't know if Gareth is still on the call. He's probably gone, but we have also discussed that with external audit, as you say, and they certainly take account of that in our risk assessments. The self-assessment fully acknowledges that risk. The external assessment that we had last year fully acknowledged that that risk and recognised it. So in that sense, we're not in any way, shape or form trying to hide that concern. We're being absolutely upfront about it and looking to manage it in an effective way otherwise by putting appropriate measures in place. So as I say, I can't remove the concern, because ultimately, in an ideal world, yes, we would have a completely and utterly independent role. But I am, I guess I can give you my professional assurance, for whatever that's worth, that we're seeking to manage it, and I don't believe it is of an issue for us. Thank you.
Chairman, can I come back on that?
Yes, Councillor Paul, I was just coming to you, so your hand was up.
Let me first say, Amanda's professional assurance on that is deeply reassuring. I'm not questioning at all that. I feel total confidence in her professional assurance. But I do remain concerned, and as she referred to in her explanation, which was full, my best understanding, and somebody will tell me if I'm wrong, is, as she said, other line management responsibilities have also been moved to, as I understand it, Sioned, one of those regulatory, where she is now managing the authority's complaints officer, if I understand correctly. She'll challenge me if I've got that wrong. In a sense, that further adds to my discomfort. But maybe I just have to live with these discomforts in the present situation, because there are so many discomforts we have to live with at the present situation. Well, I just want to acknowledge that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Paul. Councillor Gronwy?
Thank you, Chair. Don't know if you can hear me. I've just been listening to some of the concerns raised by members, or by Paul in particular, and there seems to be some concern that an underlying tone that something's not right with the authority. Now, I've been a member since the authority was created, and yes, whilst there have been occasional incidents where an appropriate action has taken place, I am extremely confident in the probity of our staff, on our integrity of our staff, and on the work they do to ensure that this authority is acting in an appropriate manner. So, whilst there might be some areas of concern, because of the mere fact that we are and have been an authority that's made up of a coalition of different groups over the years, and the ability of those members to ask questions whenever they so choose, whenever they have concerns, I have, on the whole, I'm very confident in the structures within our authority to make sure that we do act appropriately, and we manage the public purse in a proper manner. So, unless there's specific issues, I'm not sure why there seems to be concern that there seems to be implying that there's misconduct or mismanagement, and I don't believe that exists in any significant form, if any. That's just my comments. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Granby. Councillor Gareth?
I'd just like to say that I think Councillor Paul is quite right in making sure that we as a committee actually check that we've got the correct procedures in place. It's not saying that there's misconduct going on, it's just making sure that we understand what the procedures are and that they are actually fit for purpose. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Gareth. Sinead?
Yes, I'd just like to provide assurance. I would like to say it's absolute, but absolute is never a word that we as auditors use. For example, last week in a meeting of risk with the strategic directors and the heads of service, my main concern that I put forward as being one of the higher corporate risks is contract management in the authority. Just to give you an example, I am being objective and independent. Thank you.
Thank you, Sinead. Amanda?
Yeah, just actually to come back in as well, just in the context of the point that Paul just made around complaints, and as he says quite rightly, that is one of the things that's going to move under Sinead in the new revised structure. But actually, you know, I guess what I would like to point out actually is how I think moving that into internal audit actually brings huge potential and synergy in the context of you know, Sinead and the audit team actually having more significant access to understanding of where issues are being raised, which might imply or lead to an understanding that the control environment, it needs to be strengthened or so on and so forth, and therefore actually will feed directly into the risk assessment around internal audit work in a much more coherent and proactive way than it does at the moment, and also I think in the context as well as not only in the context of picking up bad practice or poor control arrangements and making sure they're addressed, but actually also in seeking to identify and promulgate good practice. So, you know, again, in the same way, if I use external audits as an example, where you know, Wales Audit Office, Audit Wales, should I say, as they call now, have obviously their audit function, but they also have a good practice team that looks to identify and as I say, promote good practice across Wales. You know, I think again there's real opportunity in the work in linking it directly, more directly with the work of internal audit to not only, as I say, pick up the control issues, but actually more importantly as well, or as importantly as well, to promote and promulgate good practice. So you know, rather than it being a risk area transferring over, I actually would argue that it's a real opportunity to further strengthen the work of internal audit and make sure that its activities are really focused to those areas of high risk that come through from those complaints that we receive externally. So just wanted to make that point. Thank you.
Thank you, Amanda. I think personally I would concur very much with what you've just said. Do we have any other comments or no? Okay. So we've been asked to consider and note the results of the internal audit self-assessment for 2023-24. Please, can I ask for a proposer in support of that? Thank you, Councillor Dolan. And is there a seconder? Jane, do we have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor
yes.
Gareth. Yeah. And can I ask for a show of hands in support, please? Okay, thank you. And is there anyone against? No. Anyone abstaining? No. Okay, Jane, I think that is unanimous support, and we can note the results of the self-assessment.
Yes, that's carried, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Now, can we move on, please, to item 8A, which is the financial update from Amanda?
Thank you very much, Chair. Yeah, so I have just prepared a short presentation, which I'll share my screen in a minute, but just to set the context. So obviously, as was referenced earlier in the committee, you know, it's absolutely appropriate that the audit committee is cited on effectively, you know, what the council is doing to manage its position in terms of its ability to set a balanced budget, and obviously in light of the very significant risk that both Conwy and many other local authorities face as a result of the lack of funding into local government across the UK. So I'll just quickly share my screen with the presentation. I'm hoping that you can now see it on the screen.
Yeah.
And I take it the slides moved on. You can see the next slide. Yeah. So I just want to quickly run through where we are in terms of the sort of budget position. So, you know, obviously, you know, the reports that are going through the democratic decision-making process are available, publicly available, and I've distributed them separately to the lay members, just so that you're cited of those. So obviously, as in any year, you know, and as set out in that paper that came to audit committee before, as in any year, you know, through the autumn, we prepare, although it's a comparatively ongoing process, through the autumn in particular, we prepare detailed estimates of what we anticipate our resource shortfall or our resource need to be for the following year. Obviously, that is then matched with the resources that are coming into us as an authority, and that identifies a shortfall. And from there, we continue to work through into setting a balanced budget, or hopefully setting a balanced budget by the early March in any year. Of particular relevance to all of that, obviously, then is the settlement that we get from Welsh Government. And this slide just sets out the provisional settlement. So we were notified of the provisional settlement on the 20th of December. And obviously, it was only at that point we had relative clarity on the funding that is coming into us, albeit we have then subsequently had a further notification, which I'll mention in a minute. But just to pick up on the provisional settlement that was announced on the 20th of December. So the provisional settlement effectively confirmed the level of funding that was in the that was actually announced in the final settlement for 23-24, which was that there would be an increase across the sector of funding of 3.1%, and in fact that was held. You know, so Welsh Government honoured for want of a better word, that commitment to put 3.1% into the settlement. Having said that, in confirming that commitment, they also then did withdraw other grant funding, which actually meant that the real terms impact of the settlement was less than anticipated. But anyway, across Wales, there was a Welsh average increase of 3.1%. That was then it spread. There was a range between 2 and 4.7%, subject to how the formula distributed it across different bodies. And as is always and often has been the case, Conwy were at the bottom end of that settlement arrangement. And in fact, along with Gwynedd Council, in accordance with the formula, we would have had less than 2% of an uplift in our AEF. Because it was particularly impacted negatively on Gwynedd and on ourselves, Welsh Government introduced a floor arrangement whereby they guaranteed every authority at least a 2% uplift. And so Conwy and Gwynedd benefited from that floor arrangement. And for Conwy specifically, we got another £500,000. Had that floor arrangement not been in place, we'd have actually ended up getting a settlement of something like 1.7 or 1.8. I can't remember the percentage now. We lost out quite significantly in the formula as a result of impacts to do with population and pupil numbers. So over the last 2 years, I've just been sent a message to say you can only see the first page. So can you see the page with the settlement graph on, or can you only see the header page?
Just the header page,
okay.
Amanda.
Right. It's moving on my screen, but not on yours. Okay, I tell you what I'm going to do is, rather than share the actual slides, I will instead share the agenda pack, which has got the slides in it. Oh, now I'm struggling to see what you're. Sorry, just bear with me. This is one of these awful moments where technology is causing me difficulty. I've completely lost sight now of what you can and can't see. So can you see me again physically? Yeah, I think so. So
yes.
So, right, so I'll try again to share my screen, and I'm going to share the agenda pack instead. So can you, yeah, so we've got the agenda pack instead. So let me just get to the, right, here we are. Everybody can see the settlement slide now. Hopefully.
Success, yes.
Yeah, fantastic. Okay, yeah, so this slide anyway, this just shows the spread of how different authorities across Wales have had the settlement. And I was just saying before I got confused with technology, I was just saying that we as an authority have lost out significantly as a result of population changes. So between the 2011 census and the 2021 census, Conwy actually saw a reduction in its population by just some 450 people. However, because other authorities in Wales saw increases, we have ended up there's been a redistribution of money within the settlement. So they don't change the overall pot, but they reallocate within the formula. And we actually have lost, between last year and this year, we've lost nearly £4 million in funding because we had a reduction in our overall population of just some 450 people. But also within that, we had a reduction in the number of children that we have and an increase in the number of elderly people we have. And unfortunately, the way the settlement works is you get more money in the settlement for children than you do for elderly. And so that's had this negative result for us. And as I say, we've lost nearly £4 million as a result of that. So on this slide, at the time I didn't know what the impact of the potential additional consequential to Wales was. We actually received notification of that last Tuesday on the 7th of February, Welsh Government now have confirmed that they are going to be distributing that £25 million back to local authorities. First of all, by reinstating a social care workforce development grant that they'd cut, and that amounts to just over 10 million of it, and then the remaining 14-point-odd million they're going to redistribute as part of the settlement again. Thankfully, they're not removing the floor arrangement, which was a concern that I had that they might do. They're instead going to distribute it on the new thing, and we've had unofficial notification that we will be getting an additional £526,000. So rather than the 4.1, we'll be getting £4.6 million. I would also just point out, though, that there is still a very big risk, which is to do with the fact that there is an increase in the teachers' pension employer contribution rate following the last actuarial revaluation of the teachers' pension fund. And that will cost us as an authority an additional £2.5 million. I'm expecting that we should get a distribution of grant for that of £2 million. However, that has not yet been confirmed, and there is a risk that we won't get it. In terms of setting the budget, I'm assuming that we will get it, and therefore, if it turns out that we don't get it, then that will next year have to fall on our balances and be built in the subsequent year. I'm aware that Welsh Government and the WLGA are lobbying UK government very vociferously about their need to honour their commitment to fund that. But as I say, it's yet to be confirmed, and it won't be confirmed as part of the settlement. So we will expect it as an in-year grant. Moving on then to where we are as an authority. This is the position when the last budget report was issued. And so effectively, you can see there that we have pressures from pay awards, pressures for capital financing costs, so which are to do with obviously the capital programme itself, but also the change in interest rates, which has really come to full fruition for next financial year, because we still had some borrowing at lower rates, which have now come to an end, and therefore we've had to replace with borrowing at higher rates, and so on and so forth. There's a whole host of pressures from business cases, the bulk of which are inflationary driven. So again, pay awards for care workers, etc., plus other inflationary rises on indexation on various contracts and so on and so forth. And so against our pressures of 33 million, we have had, or we're anticipating an increase in our Welsh Government funding of, it's 4.1 there, but it's now 4.6. The council tax base has increased, not just in absolute terms. In fact, in absolute terms, it's not increased very much, but we have, council has determined that the premium on second homes and long-term empties will now be 100%. From April 24, so that has the effect of increasing our council tax base. So there's additional money from that. I've mentioned the grant funding for the teachers' pension, and so last time of reporting, we still had a resource shortfall of some £25 million. Now, obviously, services have been asked to identify proposals for budget reductions, and we have been looking at other things as well. So again, in the last cabinet, as they were formulating their thinking in the context of what they will be recommending on to council on the 29th of February, there was consideration of potentially not accepting some of the business cases, because some of the business cases, whilst were important and were there largely to manage risks that we know we have in the authority, there was a view equally that maybe they were risks we had to continue to manage because we couldn't necessarily address by funding with a business case. So that was a bit shy of 2 million. As I say, there's a range of budget proposals being put forward by services to just shy of 8 million. Cabinet gave an indication of a 6% budget reduction for schools. So to just put that in context, so obviously a reduction after all of the other things have gone in, so after all the pay goes in, etc., etc. So cash reduction. I've merely here modelled the council tax just for illustrative purposes at 9%. Obviously, the decision around council tax is yet to be taken. I've just put 9% there in as an illustrative amount, because within the report, to the extent you've had a look, there was a range of 8 to 11%, and in fact, actually, that didn't produce a balanced budget. So I'm just for illustrative purposes here, just I've modelled it at 9%. Then there was a decision to fund some one-off aspects of the business cases from balances, because whilst obviously I've been in my professional opinion and my professional advice to members been quite vociferous in my belief that we should not be funding ongoing revenue activity from balances. It is appropriate to fund one-off items from balances, and therefore there's that recommendation as well. So from the decisions taken at that time, or I say decisions, thoughts around what will be being recommended onto council. Some of those things are the potential building blocks of how we close that gap. So in terms of how we're going to address any remaining shortfall, because a number of those things may vary in specific detail in the final proposals, but effectively, significant work has been undertaken in the last 3 weeks to look at how we can address that subsequent shortfall, and also to take account of other factors. So for instance, we launched at the beginning of the year a budget consultation to seek the views of residents in the context of what services were most important to them, and so on and so forth. And clearly, members will no doubt want to consider that budget consultation in shaping the final set of circumstances that will lead to the recommended budget onto council. We've also been working with services to seek to identify any further budget reduction proposals, and certainly at the time of the last report, there were 1 or 2 budget proposals where there was still some work to do to determine whether they were actually appropriate or not. That work's now been undertaken, and so that there are some more budget proposals coming forward. There's also work being done around looking at the assumptions around pay and capital financing. Certainly in relation to pay, more information is available now around the assumptions being used across Wales, and I've also been doing a lot of detailed work trying to model different scenarios around the national living wage growth. Unfortunately, there's very little formal intelligence out there, so I've been trying to sort of do it in a number of different ways to see whether the assumptions we've made in relation to pay were reasonable or not, and could be altered. And then obviously, there's further consideration around what that council tax level might be, and also any further use of balances, notwithstanding you know, my advice around not using that. So the next steps, which I guess to some extent are sort of being undertaken or have been undertaken by now, are around, as I say, those budget assumptions and savings proposals. The next Finance and Resources Committee is on the 19th of February with Cabinet on the 20th, and effectively the report that will be going through to those committees will be effectively proposing a budget which will then form the recommendation onto council on the 29th. We won't get the actual final settlement until late February, early March, but we, as with any year, we don't anticipate the final settlement being significantly different than the information we have at this stage. To the extent it differs, it tends to differ by less than £10,000. And as I say, council will be considering the budget on the 29th of March. Just to also outline that we have done, we've also in a report equally going to the 19th and 20th on the third quarter outturn. At the last quarter, at the mid-year point, we were forecasting at that point an overspend of 3.8 million. The latest forecast is now 1.7 million, so an improvement, positive improvement, which is obviously good and reflective of the work that's been done to try and slow and pause expenditure. But having said that, we also are carrying a further risk in relation to the current year's budget and the current year's outturn, in that we have incurred around £1.4 million in expenditure on the back of Storm Babette. We have made an application to Welsh Government under the Emergency Financial Assistance Scheme, whereby seeking financial support for those costs. They will only support an amount above a certain threshold, which is 564,000 in our case, and that 564,000 is included in my forecast of the 1.7. Having said that, Welsh Government are yet to confirm whether they plan to open the Emergency Financial Assistance Scheme or not. And therefore, the difference between the 1.4 and the 568 that I've already included is a risk for us, because if they don't open it, that additional £840,000 will fall onto us and onto our balances. So that's the position in relation to the quarter three outturn. So I just wanted to run you through that in the context of you understanding the processes that we're going through to get to the point of being able to set a balanced budget at the end of February. So happy to take any questions.
Many thanks, Amanda. For the Councillor Gareth.
Thank you, Amanda. And I must admit, I do not envy your job of trying to actually deliver a balanced budget under these circumstances. But the bottom line is we have to deliver a balanced budget, because not being able to do it doesn't, is not on the agenda as far as I'm concerned. Just a couple of things in your comments, in that the reassessment of the modelling of the pay and the capital budgets. And I think it's, is it really sensible, bearing in mind our financial resilience at the moment that is so low, that we cannot afford to be too bullish on our modelling and our projections, because we simply haven't got that resilience. And bearing in mind that, in the last things I looked at, there was a high risk that the budget savings may not actually be achieved. And we've covered the teachers' pension, the risks on that, the risk that we won't get the payout for the storms, you know, it just emphasises our need to have those reserves in place. And, you know, they are extremely low, so I don't think we can actually risk plundering the reserves unless we absolutely have to. And, you know, whilst it's tempting, I'm sure, to actually decide what the answer is that we want, be it a council tax increase of 9.9%, and then we work back and do the modelling to fit in with that. I think we really, really need to be cautious with the modelling. And yes, if we've overestimated it by a bit and we come in under budget and under those things, then yes, we need to put it into the reserves. It's a much better position to be than that we've been over optimistic and we've missed them because we haven't got that resilience to fall back on. Thank you.
Thank you,
Okay.
Councillor Gareth.
Do you want me to come back on that now, Ian?
Yes, please, Amanda.
Yeah, yeah, I absolutely understand what you're saying, Councillor Gareth, and you know, no doubt we can rehearse the debate in Frosk as well. But I think at the end of the day, it's about an appropriate balance, isn't it? And you know, whilst I think it is important that we are prudent in our estimates, and to the extent there has been reconsideration of it, I am still confident that the level that we're putting in the budget is prudent, and because as you say, it would be folly to be over optimistic and then find ourselves falling significantly short. And you know, I'm aware, for instance, you know, that some authorities have modelled as low as 3% in their budgets for pay, and clearly, you know, that for me that would be silly. It would well, I perhaps shouldn't use that phrase. That would suggest I'm thinking my colleagues are silly, and I don't mean that at all. But I think for us, because we don't have that security of the reserves in the background, I think that would be an imprudent thing for us to do. I'm sure those that are using lower percentages have more surety with it being cash back through reserves. So I think it is then a balance, because actually clearly if you go the other way, if you have too much in reserves, if you have too much in a provision and you're then effectively making significant cuts to a greater extent than you need to, and you know, we have seen in the recent weeks, haven't we, or you know, the reaction to some of the reductions that we're potentially, or members are potentially going to be forced to have to make in the end. But so I think it is really a balance between being appropriately prudent but not being so overcautious that you're then actually making cuts and having a greater negative impact through that over prudency, if you know what I mean. So yeah, I obviously, as I say, I'm sure the details can be thrashed out at the scrutiny committee, but I think as a general observation, you know, I guess my role is around advising members around what is an appropriate, a prudent level, and at the end of the day, it is an estimate and it's a judgment, and you know, it's a judgment that members need to be happy with when they vote for the budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Amanda. Councillor Charlie.
Thank you, Chair. I'm having horrendous IT problems this morning, so apologies. I keep having to swap from one device to the other. I want to thank Amanda for a presentation, but I think another area we should touch on is historically what Conwy has done in terms of how we've arrived where we are. As recently as sort of 10, 11 years ago, Conwy had the third lowest council tax rate in Wales. When I joined the authority in 2017, we had the lowest reserves in Wales. So there was a deliberate policy in the past to keep council tax low whilst running down reserves. In terms of the figures, over about a 10-year period compared to Denbighshire, that would equate to about £50 million, compared to Gwynedd, about £70 million. So we're talking about significant sums of money, and those decisions have absolutely affected our resilience to weather the storm that we're facing now. We know next year's budget in a smaller proposal to use £4 million with reserves. We just don't have that luxury, but that is where we're at. Amanda touched on the funding formula. To give a flavour for that, we receive 15% less per capita than Denbighshire and 10% less per Gwynedd. So these are really substantial sums of money. You're looking at about 20, adjusted for our tax base compared to Denbighshire, you're looking at £20 million year on year. Within the current settlement, Denbighshire will receive an additional 3.5 million compared to us, which again, that equates to sort of 4 or 5% council tax before you start to do anything. And in response to Gareth, I absolutely agree. Financial resilience is absolutely clear, but it won't be my decision, it'll be council's decision. And again, last year we had the highest council tax rate in Wales, which for the first time brought us above Denbighshire. But Gareth, you didn't support it. People are saying that we need to lower council tax rate, it's too high. And that's the balance I have to find. We're in a situation where people are struggling. We're going out with an ask which will be high, much higher than I'm comfortable with, but we're also balanced. We're also making cuts as well. So people are being asked to pay more for less, which is clearly a very unattractive package. But I think on a final note, it's also important to point out that there are 350 authorities who levy council tax in the UK, and Conwy is the 90th lowest, if you like. So we're just outside the lower quartile. And given the relative lack of funding we get compared to other authorities, to be just outside the lower quartile in what we actually charge our residents for the service we provide is, I think, something we should not lose sight of. But yeah, it's incredibly challenging. It's finding a balance between protecting our most vulnerable, our essential services, not making rash decisions which will cost us more money in the long term, and appreciating the fact that for many residents, any council tax rise is incredibly difficult and very, very unwelcome. Yeah. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Charlie, for putting it even more in context. Thank you. Nigel.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to open by commending the members and the officers for their ability to get to grips with what is an extremely difficult set of financial circumstances. And having watched Cabinet and Frost go through the process and seen the clear drivers to try and achieve fairness in this approach that Councillor Charlie, for example, has referred to, as well as dealing with the issue about the dichotomy of very, very little services being received by a lot and volume of services being received by a few. It's a very, very difficult scenario. What I would want to do from a GAC perspective is to ask the type of questions I think that GAC need to ask, which isn't about scrutinising of individual budgets, as Amanda and I have discussed historically, but it is about pitching at some of the issues around the nature of the decisions being made by the council at this point. So I'm going to run several of those past you, and to be helpful, I think through you, Chair, it's probably Amanda or Charlie that needs to come back on these, and I'll give a perspective from my view based on the CIPFA assessment of Section 114 authorities. And as Charlie says, that the ability to keep your council tax low from a political angle can lead to huge problems, which is exactly what happened with Northamptonshire, which led to the Section 114 issue and the collapse of the authority. Politically, deliberately lower and keep low your council tax. And that is not a reasonable business approach to any council tax assessment. The questions I've got through you, Chair Amanda. Even within the current financial landscape, a medium-term planning scenario supports financial sustainability. Is the Conwy medium-term plan currently robust, and have you got indicative council tax figures in years 2 and years 3? That's the first question I have for you.
Do you want to take them in turn, Nigel? Like you.
Yeah. Do you want them? I've got 6 of them. Do you want them all at once?
Yeah.
Or do you
No.
want them
That's fine.
individually?
I just wasn't sure. So yeah. So just in that context. So the medium-term financial plan has been updated in the context of the the sort of forecast effectively of the future pressures, and it also recognises a range of activity that we've already started and needs to be further taken forward in over the coming years, because clearly some of those things are longer term. You know, they're not going to have quick wins in terms of savings for the immediate future, but may take a year or two to gather. The bit that's missing, I guess, if that's the right phrase, is we haven't yet formulated that into a timelined plan of when we would then be seeing savings dropping into individual financial years to meet those financial challenges. So that's work which we will be undertaking as soon as this budget's out of the way, and I guess effectively builds really on the peer review recommendation around having that sort of transformation plan, etc. Just as an element of that as well, I would also just bring to your attention as a committee that we are actually meeting with and engaging with SIPFA. I think we're meeting with them, initial meeting next week actually, in order to take their learning around the work that they have done with a number of authorities who are actually already in Section 114, and they do work around health checks and this, that, and the other, and we're engaging with them to really take learning from that, but also I think really get to understand what exactly a Section 114 notice, should we ever get there, and hopefully all the actions we're taking will avoid us getting there. But to the extent we do get there, I think at the end of the day, it's fair to say there is a lack of understanding about what does it actually mean, and what, I think this definition of what exactly is statutory and what isn't statutory, and so on and so forth. So we're engaging with them to really take advantage of their direct experience in working with those authorities in Section 114, so that we can preempt and avoid that situation. So my question, my answer is, I guess, is I fully recognise the point you're making, and it is in development. I think the frustrating thing that we have as an issue, and I'm sure this applies to officers and also to members, is that unfortunately sometimes dealing with the day-to-day and the issues of today take up so much time because of our limited capacity. Dealing with the tomorrow is that little bit harder, but it is absolutely the thing that we are moving on to as soon as this budget's set.
Thank you, Chair. Second area is over-ambitious savings, and it picks up one of Councillor Gareth's comments earlier, that we continue to see evidence of over-ambitious savings targets that are not well evidenced. This is particularly concerning when historic records show things have not been achieved. So the question for you is, how robust are the business cases?
Yeah, I absolutely. It's an area of concern, certainly, and I guess I would make sort of a slight reference, perhaps correction in one context. If you look at the current year, actually our percentage achievement of our savings is actually very, very high. And I think there's about 1 million out of the 11 million put forward last year that we're struggling to achieve, and not because they're not going to be achieved, but because they were anticipated a little earlier than they will be achieved, and the services who aren't making those savings, those specific savings, have actually identified other savings instead. So I would actually argue that the achievement of our savings is quite high. In terms of the savings that are being put forward for next year, then clearly we recognise that the savings are starting to become, well, I'm sure they've been unpalatable for a while, but they're becoming increasingly unpalatable because they invariably are around cutting services. Now certainly in light of some of the savings from the current year, where you know, probably in reality we ought to have realised they weren't going to be achieved quite as early as they were anticipated. I've been quite rigorous this year in discussing those savings proposals with services for next year, and in fact I've thrown out some of the savings proposals that people were putting forward because I didn't believe them to be achievable. So I think there is no doubt still a challenge in terms of achieving some of them, mainly because obviously there may well be a reaction to some of the savings, but I think nonetheless, you know, I've reasonable confidence that the savings being put forward will be achieved. I think an area of difficulty probably, which is a slight external, well, it's sort of slightly arm's length, is obviously the school's position, because obviously the school's budget works in a little bit of a different way, in the sense of you know, the management of the achievement of those savings is sort of slightly at arm's length from us, because obviously it's managed by the schools and individually in the school governors, etc. But you know, and we're aware that possibly on the back of this round, that some schools might need to seek loan arrangements from the council to manage their budget position in the short term, but I'm unsighted at this stage on what level of activity that might be. Hopefully not certainly if I use last year as an example, at this stage of the year a lot of schools were indicating that they might come for loan, and in fact in the end it was only one, so you know, it's difficult to judge for this year, but yeah, so yes, I recognise the concern around the achievement of savings, but in broad terms I'm reasonably confident about how robust they are.
Through you, Chair, I don't know if Charlie wanted to come in on that one.
Yeah, Councillor Charlie.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, just in terms of setting a medium-term budget, I think there's a couple of things there. I think historically there's been a situation where there's a bit of a boy cried wolf, where we'll be told we're going to get a terrible settlement, and then it's been a bit better, and then, you know, things aren't as bad as we thought, and we're to be grateful for whatever we've got. This year, I think, has been the first year where it has been worse than we expected. Demand is always an issue, so we have soaring demand that often is due to changes in legislation. So if we look at housing, we used to have a priority need pre-COVID. Our budget for that was around £470,000 per annum. Welsh Government changed the legislation that there was no priority need. We're now spending £6 million per annum, so that would blow apart any sort of a prospective budget you had over those 3 years. If you look at other things, interest rates, you know, that's a massive impact on our budget. So we went from a generation of low interest rates where you could kind of plan roughly where you're at to this Truss's budget, blew it all up. So we have another 2.6 million there. Mostly, you know, it's service led, isn't it? If we have more homeless people, we have to home them. If more elderly people move here who require domiciliary care, we have to look after them. So it's a very, very difficult process to set that budget out. The mood music now is not great. It's that settlements will be really, really low. Well, that would mean we then start redundancy processes, which in themselves cost money, and then you find out the situation is not as bad as you thought. Well, you wasted all this money on redundancies. So it's a very, very complex beast. I'm sure we'd all rather be in a situation where we could plan. But unfortunately, if you're looking at a situation where that fund is cut every year, that makes for a very, very bleak outlet. And you know, I can't just cut services. You have to have consultation. I have to get members' support. So you're constrained in many ways. And I know that's not very helpful, but that's the political reality of the situation that we face. If we don't get a realistic funding that will cover our costs over the next 3 years, it's very difficult to drive meaningful change.
Thank you, Councillor Charlie, for the clarification. Back to you, Nigel.
Yeah, just a supplementary, Amanda. It does seem to me that the ability to extricate fees and charges from a debate about savings and cuts is actually quite important from a political perspective, as well as an actual perspective. And I think there may be a benefit gain from doing that. I mean, if you go back to the SIP for benchmarking report 2015-16 that set out quite clearly the fees and charges that might be levied across an authority on a really useful questionnaire. If you've not seen that recently or gone back to it recently, is well worth a look at, because it not only identifies the whole service areas that you can levy fees and charges, but also the approximate levels and the comparison for benchmarking purposes that might be achievable. Otherwise, income generation can get lost in that debate about cuts. And I just flagged that as a potentially an area that needs more exploration. The third area I have is about reserves. Again, Councillor Gareth picked this up. While the economic climate continues to be difficult, organisations that have little to no reserves face significantly higher risks. Now, we know that the Audit Wales has flagged reserves as an issue for the authority. Do you think we have the right approach at the moment?
Just quickly back onto income a second. Yeah, just in terms of income, I think it's a debate we've actually been having this year, really, around separating out additional income from fees and charges away from, as you say, the budget reductions, because not only, as you say, does it get lost, but actually those services that have the ability to raise income actually benefit from not being impacted as much through cuts as services who have no income in the way we apply at the moment. So we've started to have that debate, and I think something we'll be looking to address for next year's budget. As an aside, in terms of reserves, yeah, I when you say is our approach right, I guess our approach in simplistic terms is to try not to use any, and if we have opportunity to build them, I guess the difficulty in reality is that whilst service demands continue to grow, it's becoming increasingly difficult to contain our spending in some instances, and therefore to not impact on reserves. So, you know, certainly taking this year as an example, you know, from forecasting an overspend or an excess spend over budget, perhaps I would argue, rather than an overspend, because overspend suggests almost lack of, wanton lack of control, whereas as Charlie's just said, we can't help when people present at our door, and we have to deal with that. But to the extent we've been messaging from really on early in the year around trying to slow and contain expenditure, and at the end of the day, slowing expenditure only ultimately pushes it onto a future period. We have managed to bring that overspend back down, but actually, having said that, we probably were looking in a more promising position. But just as an example, just a month or so ago, we had a whole several new cases in the context of children looked after, from out of nowhere, that resulted in a significant increase in our commitment to the end of the year in relation to that budget, and clearly, we can't not deal with those most vulnerable in our society. We have to address those pressures and put those children in suitable placements for their complex needs. So, we are constantly fighting that. So, I think, certainly historically, and I think Charlie has referred earlier, historically, using balances to plug $1 million or $2 million within the budget was quite a commonplace activity, and that helped support Conway's approach to being one of low council tax in the past. I think certainly over the last 2 or 3 years, members have heeded my advice, and obviously listened to external auditors, etc., in not using reserves in that way, and we have we do continue to try to preserve that, and again in setting the budget for 24-25, apart from the small use by through one-off reserves for one-off spend, you know, subject obviously to all the decisions yet to be taken. There's no planned use of reserves within the proposed budget either. There won't be any planned use of reserves within the proposed budget. So I guess my challenge, and the bit that I find difficult, is around how do we create the space to try and build reserves, and that I think is the really difficult challenge that we have. But you know, at a time when, you know, if you take our pressures this year of some, you know, towards £30 million, and on the basis that Welsh Government give us 70% of our funding, you know, that would indicate we should be getting about 20 million from Welsh Government, you know, when they've given us 4. You know, it's very, very difficult to fight your way out of it. I think we're dealing with the difference between what you would do in an ideal world and the realities of where we are. But that's not to say that we should be blasé to that. I'm not being blasé remotely. We clearly need to do everything we can to support our resilience and our financial standing. But it's very difficult to see how we can reverse it with any significant way to start building reserves, I guess.
Okay, thank you, Amanda. Councillor Charlie, were you wanting to come back in on that?
Just to add to what Amanda says, I mean, there's 2 things we can do to build the reserves. There's decreased demand, and we are making some really positive steps with that. We've got 3 facilities for out-of-county children looked after to come back into our county, which will come on stream later on this year. We've got a head of housing in to try and accelerate delivery of housing to relieve our pressures on our housing. I've held meetings with the other leaders in North Wales, meetings with the Chief Exec and Denbighshire, the leader, to sort of look at ways we can work together. I think there's a real sphere of work we can do around being more commercial with some of our assets. Council tax is absolutely loathed and detested by people. We had the highest rate in Wales last year, despite inflation being 11%. You get castigated for the cuts and you get castigated for the council tax, and you do get some real vitriol. Members have been abused verbally. I get an awful lot of emails about it, and you know, it's quite a difficult thing to do because it does hit on the poorest the hardest. It goes out of your account every month. You see the potholes that we can't afford to fix, so it's a very, very emotive subject. We need to look for other ways other than council tax. But again, when historically you're low, that ability to bring it up is really difficult. People don't care about how much they paid in the past. They just care about the percentage increase. Pembrokeshire has got a really, really low rate of council tax, but they've had no thanks for that. They're getting absolutely slaughtered like we were last year because they're going in with a rise, which will bring it up to a reasonably sensible level. So it is challenging, but it is also no good for us just to sit in our hands and go, you know, this is all awful. We have to find solutions to these things. So quite frankly, if we don't, then what is the future for local government and this authority? So things are happening, but you do get constrained by the sheer amount of time and effort you put into actually delivering a balanced budget. It's very hard sometimes to lift your head out of the mire and actually look at the future and look at ways you can drive improvement and drive down costs essentially. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Charlie. Nigel, did you have further questions?
It's really difficult.
Sorry to interrupt. I think Councillor Paul wants to come in as well.
Yeah, I noted that, but Nigel had a series of questions.
I'm happy to take a break from the remaining questions if on after this response. Can I come back to Charlie's last comments there? The reality of the situation in Wales with regard to council tax against the position in England with regards to council tax is significantly different. There is no capping in Wales, no referendum requirement if members wish to raise the council tax beyond 4.99% in Wales. as that does exist with authorities trying to balance and their budget in relation to that. If you're looking at how you explain that away in England, you can blame central government. In Wales, it's more difficult because you have the power without the restriction. But it does provide some opportunity, and therefore the powers that you have available in Wales try and achieve a balanced budget. And the balance of that, again, is sort of how best to judge that and get that right. On issues of capital programming, typically, if you want to borrow money, if you're an individual, the most likely scenario is you want to take out a mortgage in order to purchase a property. That's probably the biggest financial outlay you have. As a uninformed customer, you'd go along to the bank you got your bank account with, and you pick up an offer from them because that was what you thought happened. The more informed customer would go to a broker or a financial intermediary in order to try and work out what the best deal was on the high street in order to make sure they got the benefit of that in terms of the mortgage arrangement they go for. As part of that process, the assessment of the individual will be stress tested for affordability. So coming back to the capital programme that we've got here with the council, it does seem to me we've got an opportunity with Arling Close to look at stress testing or getting an opinion from our Treasury management financial intermediaries as to what their view is of the projected capital programme going forward. And that might be something, if we don't do explicitly under the terms with Arling Close, might be something, Amanda, that we look at more closely in the future to try and provide that reassurance to members that we have stress tested the affordability of our capital programme, not just from our own political perspective or officer perspective, but from an independent intermediary perspective, advisor perspective. But just a thought on that, Amanda, would be useful.
Yeah, I certainly we take advice from Arling Close in the context of our borrowing and you know, their recommendations around the appropriate timing for borrowing and so on and so forth. But yeah, we can certainly engage with them more around the capital programme. I mean, just in broad terms, you know, I think you know, certainly over the last couple of years, we've taken reports back through democracy a few times now, really to highlight the fact that actually our capital programme perhaps had become a little bit unaffordable, and there was a need to significantly cap our activity and bring that back down. And you know, members have made a range of decisions around that, and actually we've stripped out a number of things from our capital programme in light of that affordability, and certainly in relation to next year, the proposed capital programme is significantly smaller than has been the case in the past, in recognition of that. I think, however, it does cause future longer term issues because obviously there's certain work which we do through our capital programme around our infrastructure in particular, where, you know, you can only limit the spend you're doing on that for, you know, a comparatively relatively short time before you do need then to do something. And obviously equally, ambitions around schools or ambitions around other developments and facilities for the future, because I guess, you know, I guess we've got a balance as an authority where that whilst we're so busy trying to contain our spend and so busy trying to manage this very difficult financial position, we equally mustn't lose sight of our ambition for Conwy and our residents. So yeah, you know, I think the capital programme is something which we do need to sort of deal with in a much more sort of holistic way. And again, going back to the medium-term financial strategy, one of the things that Gareth and I are conscious that we need to try and develop is a capital strategy in that same way, because the council hasn't got one, it hasn't had one historically, and I think we need to get much better at understanding and planning our capital activity alongside our revenue activity. So again, something that needs to be developed. But yes, certainly, you know, we can discuss with Arlene Close as to how they may or may not be able to sort of help us consider that.
Over to you, Ian. Oh,
Might be easier for Charlie to cover, isn't
I
it?
think
Ian's
the
just gone to get his charger.
Yeah, the joys of technology.
okay.
Yeah, no, I entirely agree, Nigel. I think it's a hangover from all governments when money was essentially free or cheap, and 0.5% interest rates for a prolonged period of time. The decisions were made to embark on capital projects, which were unsustainable. I think HS2 is a really good example of that. But we are constrained, and one of our biggest capital investments is the flood defences along our coast. We've got the longest stretch of defended coastlines in the UK, whilst the council bears the burden of 15% of that. Whilst government pays the rest. To say we can't afford that 50%, we'll leave it for 10, 15 years and have a repeat of what happened in Towin in 1990. You know, we just can't do that. We just can't rein that in. But there is absolutely, and I think we have got much stricter on our capital project. But these things they're not nice to have. There's repairing bridges, repairing roads. You know, the things that you need to do, and the state of the roads. They're terrible. We should be spending £50 million a year in those. We spend 2, patching things up. There's going to be more claims. And there's lots of stuff we know we should do, but is constrained and restrained by our lack of ability to fund it. And that's my biggest annoyance in this job. It's not making difficult decisions. It's having to make decisions, you know, fundamentally, they're going to cost you more money in the long run. And that's a really good example. Our schools, we've had a rain, and we're going to build 7 and refurbish 2. That's going to be pared right back to 1 or 2. But the cost of maintaining those existing buildings is really high. Their energy bills are really high. So there is a case for being restrained with your capital, but there's also spending money to save money. Finding that balance is incredibly difficult. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Charlie. The other just minor point, Amanda, is whether we currently have a de minimis on the capital programme, because I did see 1 or 2 cases which I thought, these really should be revenue rather than capital. So that may be something you have a look at. I want to pick up on some issues going forward, but I'll give way to colleagues who I know have been waiting very patiently for me in the background whilst I've gone through my questions. But if I could come back to them later, Chair.
I think the chair's gone missing a little bit, so perhaps I'll just do it in the meantime. Before I invite you in, Councillor Paul, Cheryl, is your question about something that's already been being discussed?
One question, yes, thanks, Amanda. It was when the public consultation will be ready, and how's that going to feed into the budgetary system there? That was the first one. And the second was just an observation for this committee, just to let them know that the cabinet decision to not approve revenue risk cases has been called in, because that wasn't the determination of finance and resources. So just to let this committee know that the risk is there, that risk cases weren't approved by the cabinet, and there is a call in on that. So 1 for information and 1 question. Thanks, Amanda.
Okay, thank you. Just in terms of the answer on the consultation, so yeah, the consultation has closed now. The results have been analysed, and they will be available as part of the next budget report, which will be with FROSC on the 19th, and the papers will be out tomorrow.
Lovely, thanks.
Councillor Paul. You're on mute, Paul.
Just want to build on the range of things that have been said. I'm very conscious of Amanda's point about even in the less than 2 years I've been a councillor, this issue about creating space so that you can actually really dig down on some of the issues and try and get progress. And you'll have already heard me pursuing some issues earlier in this meeting. And I'm very, very conscious all the time of that dilemma, whether I'm pursuing Charlie as the leader or a cabinet member or a senior officer, that trying to get that balance between being a strong representative of my residents and on the other hand, the capacity and capability of the system to deal with the issues. So I do raise these issues in that context. In terms of assumptions, obviously Amanda will come under political pressure from all sides about the assumptions she makes. I will be exhorting her to resist the political pressures to reduce her present assumptions. And the reason I say that is because the last thing that I want to do is when we come to the first quarterly report for 23-24 is see us again overspending the budget that we have. And so I think we must take a cautious approach on the assumptions and just hope that if we take that cautious approach, there'll be some modest feed into reserves. And I don't doubt the pressure that she will come under to change those assumptions. But you know, I should be questioning that, and I support her in being as prudent as possible on those assumptions. The other issue which I wanted to raise, which again has been a constant issue since my election, is been this issue of statutory duties. And I have been very surprised at the pushback from senior officers, particularly in education and social care, and to some extent within the cabinet, in relation to us really debating the nature of statutory duties and our flexibility about them. And obviously, historically, I've even asked for a paper on this from the legal perspective of each of the statutory duties. Now, I know you, in a sense, again, you've got to almost create a space to be able to have that debate and that discussion. And it's worrying that the historical legacy, that doesn't appear to have been done. But I cannot see that in the next 12-month period, with the projections from Welsh Government, at least for the next 2 financial years, and also with the whole political volatility at the moment and a general election and all of that, I really do think we have to create some space, because I don't see us being in a better position over the next 2 years. I think we're going to struggle in the same way we are at the moment. There's not really a question there, but it is about confirming that whether it's Charlie or whether it is Amanda, that we actually do further work on that, because I'm not persuaded that politically we've got a grip of that statutory duty issue. Thank you.
Perhaps if I just come in first, I'm sure Charlie will have a comment. I guess one aspect of, or that's one of the reasons, Paul, why we're talking about discussing with SIPFA, because actually that understanding, as you say, is actually quite difficult, and I think in reality we have thousands of duties that are placed on us as local authority, and I'm not aware any authority actually has a definitive list, because it's so complex and so vast in its array. And I guess what I'd observe is that their duties, which effectively set a requirement. I guess the issue in a way is around the level and quality of the service, isn't it? If you know what I mean. So you might have the duty, but you can give a Rolls-Royce response, so you can give a Lada response, if I use an old reference. But I think, as I say, very much, and I think Gareth maybe referenced at Finance and Resources when he fed back after listening to the Commissioner at Birmingham, that the Commissioner had referenced, you know, our statutory duty to be to provide a library service could be, you know, you provide one book in one location for 1 hour a year, and you've offered a library service. So I think finessing that detail around that is very critical. And as I say, that's why specifically one of the aspects of our discussions with SIPFA to come is really about us trying to get that better handle and grasp on that, to allow discussion then for political decisions around that in the future. Thank you. Charlie?
Yeah, I think you've covered most of it, Amanda. SIFRA did a report in the councils which were going into section 114 close, and they actually said it was 2,000 duties that we have, but the vast majority of them are completely ill-defined. So there's a level of perception as to what we should provide. The library one is really interesting because you're right, statutory is one book for 1 hour in one building, but then there's the other Welsh Government measures, which measures us on 10 essential requirements and 12 other requirements, which we meet very, very well. We will go into consultation and reducing the opening hours, and that will be roundly slaughtered by everybody. Paul, you know, you yourselves aren't a fan of that one, and this is the issue. There's all different elements that we like, there's all the elements we're not happy with. So producing a budget is about being in the round, isn't it? It's about producing something that the vast majority of people will be, I'm not going to say happy about, but that's fair and looks after our most vulnerable.
Can I just come back, Charlie, to you and Amanda on the assumptions issue, though? I'm more with you if we're exploring council tax increases and further cuts, savings, than what I would call further creative accounting around assumptions. I think our assumptions have to be on the spectrum. As for us as a local authority, we do not have the reserves which maybe those local authorities who making what Amanda's saying is silly assumptions about 3%. I would want you and Amanda to be completely aligned on having those higher assumptions, because what I would prefer to have is that first quarter budget coming in with even some overspending, some underspending rather than overspending, because I don't want us to be in the situation again with a very difficult projection for the following year of us being straight away overspending our budget.
No doubt we can have these debates at Frosk, Councillor Paul.
Okay, so I'm back. I'm very sorry I disappeared. My battery went from 10% to 0 in a matter of seconds, so I had to fly off for a charger. Sorry about that. So I'm not sure whether, Nigel, you had completed your list or not.
I've got through.
Can you hear Nigel? I can't hear him.
No, he's gone.
We've lost him.
Frozen, I think.
Can you hear me? I'll switch off my video. Can you hear me?
I thought I got off then, Nigel.
Ha. Can I? Well, can you hear me, Amanda and Charlie?
Yeah.
Right. The two bits I want to lifting the heads off. Hello?
Yeah, we're hearing you.
Thank you. Lifting one's heads up from shoelaces and looking forward. The first one is about scenario planning. that it seems to me that given the financial context that we're working in, that it's necessary to look on the medium long term at a scenario that might involve the replication of English council tax capping in a Welsh environment, given the potential public response and issues that have arisen during the course of the year to arise, and the potential change in government and similar. And that looking at that and trying to debate that across the council, I think, is quite important. And I think there is a role for the GAC in contributing to some of those discussions from a formal perspective as part of democracy. At the moment, I sense that GAC doesn't necessarily contribute in the right way at the right time in debates about that, and it might be something that is looked at. And I flagged that on the basis of I think there's a real opportunity here, given what we've got politically. If you go back to the document measure that I posted at the start of the meeting, what that measure talks about is the allocation of membership on the Governance and Audit Committee. What the membership requirement is 2/3 elected members and 1/3 lay members. Lay members are there for a reason. The issue I've got is in how you can connect back the GAC into the democratic process more tightly. Now, there is an opportunity on the GAC for a member who is on cabinet but is not the leader to sit on GAC. Now, we don't have at the moment the finance able to sit on GAC because the finance member is the leader and consequently excluded from the ability to sit on GAC. But we do have Councillor Chris Cater in the background, and potentially acted as a messenger without favour the last time we had the GAC. But Chris is not a member of the GAC, and it may be something Charlie and others look at in group to determine how best you can make the link, because what that does is allow the GAC to be present at a cabinet meeting in a way that currently the GAC voice is not formally present at cabinet discussions. And if you contain the FROSC, if you run that onto cabinet to FROSC, you don't have that presence either in terms of it. And when you go to full council, what you don't have also is the lay member representation, because council comprises purely elected members. So I think in terms of the scenario planning, that might be an area where you can try and get a better join between the thinking and the doing around the development of budget, medium-term financial planning and similar, and ensuring that GAC is linked into that. The couple of reasons why I flagged that. The first, the potential emissions. We had a constitutional working party meet in the autumn. It produced a number of comments and reports which went through Democratic Services Committee and then into Council in January. But I'm not conscious there was formal liaison with GAC or a sounding taken from the GAC chair in relation to it. Yet there were matters in that constitutional report that have been flagged at GAC over the year, particularly with regard to terms of reference and focus of GAC as opposed to FROSC, for example, and the Measure 11 reports, which I talked about earlier. So I think that's, well, the second bit is the independent review panel for Wales recently issued papers out in terms of proposals for next financial year on allowances, which affected not only elected members, but also lay members within the authority. And there's been no consultation, as far as I can see, in relation to you back on that particular exercise over the last few weeks. So I think that if that tie-up is made, it allows for a smoother synchronisation of the work of the GAC with FROSC and Cabinet and the full Council in a way that I think is quite positive in terms of the opportunity. The second area I wanted to pick up was Councillor Gareth, in one of the debates at Cabinet, when he was in attendance there, raised, as did a number of other colleagues, the benefit of a transformation budget. Now, I certainly believe that there is a real opportunity, if the Council is to really tackle some of the hard stuff going forward, a transformation budget is necessary, and in my view can be driven by artificial intelligence, that the algorithmic decision making that can come through around how services are produced by local authorities going forward is an absolute must. Local government is slow on this area, but when you talk about transformation, it is a real tool that can and should be exploited. And I raised on the basis a couple of useful local government association papers and briefings on this at national level across the UK. But in particular, there are 3 examples which might have some relevance in the scenario we have here in North Wales that I draw to your attention that I think are worth following up or considering. The first one is work by Kingston, Richmond and Windsor and Maidenhead about, it's under the title of Achieving for Children, which is about predictive case notes and flagging the need for early safeguard intervention and prioritising of caseloads. And I know that in terms of pressures on the service areas, that is a crucial one that we have common to other authorities. The second is a Hertfordshire case, which was about predicting health problems in a social care environment. And in particular, it was about the early identification of cases that were likely to have urinary tract infection and how you can deal with those at home through antibiotics rather than a hospital environment. And that seems to me, in terms of data protection, something that might well lend itself to some kind of pooled funding arrangement, if we looked at it with Betsy Cadwallader or similar, to try and enable resources to be flagged up for a project of that description. And the third is Barking and Dagenham's prevention of homelessness, which was an analysis about what lend themselves in terms of homelessness, what are the configurations and how can you predict it, and what do you do in terms of the resourcing of prevention of homelessness through flexible appointment systems and similar, that allows you to better manage the risk and reduce the spend on the authority directly coming from dealing with the impact of homelessness rather than dealing with it from a preventative perspective. And I was thinking in terms of, if you do that on that, then you might want to think about the blue badge debate that was had earlier in the budgetary process and consider whether there are areas around systems on blue badge or similar that the authority has an early tilt at. Now, the issue from my perspective is clearly when can you do it and where do the resources come from? But I do think if the authority runs in a leading role, and I want the council to be a top performing authority, and if the council can see the initiative on AI, then I think that's the way forward.
On a point of order around the 5-minute speech rule, I think Nigel has had more than 5 minutes, and I think I need to remind the committee of the relevance to the point under discussion as well.
Yeah, is that you, Jane?
No, Ian, it's Kerry Williams, our Deputy Monitoring Officer and Solicitor.
Oh, hi, Kerry. Yeah,
Hi, Ian.
I appreciate your point. Sorry, I appreciate your point, Kerry, but I was alert to the fact that it's been going on, and we're now at almost 1 o'clock. And when we completed this, I was going to ask if everyone wanted a 10-minute break, because we've still got a couple of items after this. But my view was that Nigel was raising a question which has 6 parts, and if we shut him down after 5 or 10 minutes, we're not going to hear the other relevant points, which is the council. But I'm sure Nigel will have noted your alert, Kerry.
Thank you.
I think, Nigel, just to come back on you, thanks for highlighting those reports. It may well be that my colleagues in the relevant services are aware of them, but I'll make sure they are made aware if, just in case.
Nigel, will you, is that you complete now?
I have made my points for officers and members to consider through you, Chair, and thank you, committee, for your time on this. And I think this is a really, really important topic and subject. So it's time and attention from GAC. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Nigel. And thanks to everyone else for their contributions and comments. Are there any other matters that anyone wishes to raise?
Don't believe so, Chair.
No?
There's no hand.
Well, I'm sure. Yeah, Jane, can I just ask, are you happy that you've been able to get that extensive discussion adequately noted for the minutes?
Yes, the minutes will represent what was said.
Okay, because I have notes here of all Nigel's comments plus Councillor Paul's.
They will be
we can work
brief,
together
Chair.
on that.
Yeah, they will be a brief synopsis, Chair, of the discussion.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. So and thank you, Amanda. I think I did thank you right at the beginning for your clarity and the detail. So we've been asked as a committee to note the current position and the work being undertaken, and quite clearly there's an extensive amount of work being undertaken. And thank you, Charlie, for the further perspective on all of this and everyone's attempts to set a balanced budget for 24-25. So can I ask, please, for a proposer in the
Phil Brooks is proposing.
Jane?
Chair.
Phil. Thank you, Phil. And a seconder, please.
I'll second.
Thank you, Councillor Paul. Thank you. And can I finally ask for a show of hands to confirm that we are happy with the invitation discussion? Oh, sorry, most people's pictures disappeared from my screen. I think it is that unanimous, Jane?
I can see 4 hands. Are there anyone against?
Okay, so is anyone against? No. Anyone
Chair.
abstaining?
No, Chair.
No.
That was supported.
So that's unanimously supported. So thank you very much, everyone. Now, as I mentioned just a few minutes ago, we're now at 1 p.m. Can I suggest just a 5-minute break if anyone wants to sort of stretch their legs, and we'll come back on at 1:10.
I'll have to give my apologies. I have to leave for another meeting, so apologies. I won't be back.
Chairman, can I also raise?
Thank you very much, Charlie.
Chairman, can I also raise that I've got other meetings to go to, and I'm just concerned. I'm happy to have the 10-minute break, comfort break, absolutely, but I do think we need some indication of timing, because I'm worried we'll become incorrect as a committee. That's just my concern, because I will have to leave.
Councillor Paul, I think we have actually been here before, which is why when the meeting invitation comes out, it's always calendared for 5 hours actually, although we never anticipate 5 hours, but it should be blanking people's calendars out between 10 and 3 o'clock in the afternoon.
But
yes,
I
if
was
if you need to leave, then yeah, that's unfortunate, but so be it. But I think without a break of 5 minutes at least, we're not going to be able to do justice to the remaining 2 items, which are also very important.
Yeah. Okay. It's just that I was due to be at one of those meetings in Bondlod. I'm obviously at home now because of the flood issue. Anyway, we will just have to see how it plays out over the next hour or so. Thank you very much.
Okay. So can I? It's 6 minutes past 1 at the moment. Can I suggest we all come back at 1:15?
Okay.
Yeah, I'm getting
That's
some
fine, Ian.
thumbs up. Yeah.
I'll display a note on, because obviously we're live streaming, so we will display a note on screen so those who are watching it live know what we're doing.
Okay. Thank you, Jane.
Okay.
How are you, Ian?
I'm here. I'm here.
Penny. Good. How are your dogs, by the way?
Oh, Penny.
Hello there. The last time I met you, you were struggling with your dogs. How's life?
Life is up and down. Yes, we had. I think when we last spoke, we had 5 dogs, didn't we?
That's right.
Yeah. Now we have 4. We lost one 2 days after Christmas, unfortunately.
Oh dear, dear. It's
Yeah,
never a easy time, is it?
she was 1 month short of being 13.
Oh wow.
So she
Wow.
wasn't very well.
No, it's very
Well, she
hard.
wasn't well at all, actually, but hadn't been for a couple of years. But we did the best we could for her.
That's all you can do, isn't it?
Yep.
Yeah. And how are you finding chair, Ian?
Finding
Being chair.
Oh, I enjoy it, but it's just sometimes can be a little bit of a challenge. But
Yeah.
I get a lot of support, which I appreciate.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh well, it's a lot of reading to do, isn't it? And it's remembering those mental links, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's not only the reading that comes from council. You have to try and keep up to date with, and that's where I benefit a lot from folks like Nigel, who is well wired into a number of the subject areas. So
yes,
between us, we manage reasonably well, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, it's always an interesting committee, audit and governance, because you're never quite sure what's actually going to come up on the agenda.
Well, yes, and you're never quite sure what's going to come up on the day as well, which
right.
That's when you have to try to be quick on your feet.
Yes, well, sometimes these things take longer. It's just one of those things, isn't it?
Yeah.
Absolutely. I'm just going to go and quickly let my dog out now, and I shall be back.
Jane, are you able to see if everyone is back?
I'm here, Chair.
Ah, here we go.
Joe? I think it looks like we have 6 members. 7.
Video's off.
I think we're okay to start again, Ian, if you want. We're streaming as we speak.
Okay, thank you very much. I think there's still a few people off their videos, but let's try and make a start. So we're So thank you everyone for your patience and resilience. And we're now moving on to item 9A, which is the Treasury Management Update for Q3 2023-24. Gareth, are you taking this, or is it Hugh?
No, I'll take this one, Chair, and Hugh will take the next one if that's okay.
Okay, thanks, Gareth.
Okay. Okay, so the purpose of this report is to provide members with an update of the Treasury management activity undertaken in Q3. So that's the period ending 31st of December 2023, and just summarising activity. So hopefully members now will be familiar with this report. We now bring it on a quarterly basis to the committee. I think really not a huge amount has happened, in all honesty, since the last update. Arlene Close obviously provided some training to members, I think in the week before Christmas, if I'm correct. And that
Yes.
invitation was opened up to all members. So I hope that those that were able to attend found it useful. Feedback that I've had from a number of members suggested that that was the case and that it did provide some assurance over our relatively cautious approach. Just so members are aware, I think I've mentioned this before, but it is my intention to provide that training on an annual basis going forward as a refresher. I think it is useful, and it certainly gives that external context as well to the discussion with Arlene Close leading the session. In terms of Q3 activity, like I said, not a massive amount of change. We continue to operate within our investment and borrowing criteria that's set out in the strategy. And as was the case previously, our investments and borrowings are both reduced from the start of the financial year. And if you recall, that was, I guess, predominantly due to the fact that the LOBO borrowing that we had was called in, and we had to repay that. And we haven't yet essentially replaced that with new borrowing. I think one other point to make, probably there's been some discussion in previous meetings around one of the tables in particular, which was around the proportion of financing costs to net revenue stream. I think Nigel and possibly Councillor Gareth asked some questions around that at the last meeting, and I went away from there and had a look at it because I wasn't particularly comfortable, in all honesty, with what the projections were saying. It didn't seem to fit in with what we know in terms of what's been discussed earlier in the meeting around scaling back some of our capital programme further down the line. So what we have done, we've revisited that. We've had a look as well at what other authorities are doing in terms of disclosing that information. And I think it's fair to say a lot don't actually put that table in. I think until recently we probably didn't. However, I'm intending to keep it, and I think it is useful. The changes that we've made around it, really, we weren't properly reflecting some of the funding arrangements we get, particularly around the CRUM, so the Coastal Risk Management Programme, where the council essentially undertakes the borrowing, which we were reflecting. We weren't reflecting the fact that Welsh Government actually reimburse us for the vast majority of that, which in the main was why that trajectory over future years was showing an increase as a proportion, when actually that didn't really seem to tie in with the narrative around the actual activity that we were undertaking. Notwithstanding, we're not anticipating and we're not projecting through the medium-term financial plan that we're going to get much, if anything, over the next couple of years in terms of additional funding from Welsh Government. So just really to make members aware of that. I guess probably should also say that there are some changes that we're aware of in terms of accounting standards, where we're going to have to disclose information differently from April of this year. So in future, in the 24-25 account, so future updates for that table will include some additional information, which we'll update on in the next one. So that comparability with this report might not be there, but certainly moving forward through future committees in terms of it being a useful indicator. I think I'm minded to leave it in for now, unless anybody has any particularly strong views around taking it out, which I don't think would be the case. And I think that's probably all from me at the moment. Thank you, Chair. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Gareth. Does anyone have a question for Gareth? No, I can't see any hands up. Jane, any hands up?
No, no hands, Chair.
Okay, thank you. So we've been asked to note the update. So please, can I ask for a proposer, Councillor Dillwyn, and a seconder, Councillor John? Thank you very much. And can I ask for a show of hands? I think that's unanimous, is it, Jane?
It is indeed, Chair.
From what I can see.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, everyone, and thank you, Gareth, for that. Can we now move on, please, to the item on item 9B on capital strategy and treasury management strategy. Excuse me, 24-25.
Yeah,
and
okay,
is this one with you, Hugh?
That's right. Yes. Okay. Obviously, in advance of the following financial year, we need to set up these strategies so that we can monitor different things. And this one today is about capital strategy, treasury management strategy, and the investment strategy. Obviously, Amanda earlier was talking about the capital strategy, and the strategy document we're using at the moment is an Arlene Close template, which is set for compliance, like a lot of other councils do. But I think Amanda's referring to really developing that to be more of a localized document, so that it takes account more of sort of future long-term factors and views and asset management, etc. So this document for the capital strategy may change, but at the moment this is the one we're taking and using. So I just want to go through one or two little tables now, if that's all right. I'll be quick because I know it's been a long morning. I'm sure you're all hungry as well. So I just want to go a bit through Appendix A first. So look, and so can I ask you to turn to the page? It's easy to follow probably. So Table 1 on page 122. If you can find page 122, and there's a table there about projecting capital spend, and those projections are basically based on the Q3 capital monitoring report that's going to FROSC a week today, the capital budget for next year, which is going through the democratic process, and for the last 2 years in that table above, I've just put 7 million each year, which is basically the general capital funding from Welsh Government, where we tend to get general capital grants about 3.5, and about 3.5 million is also supported borrowing. So that first table just projects the capital spend. Then if you just go down to page 123, page 123, table 2, there it shows how the projected capital spend will be funded. And so there's external sources and own resources. So I thought I'd just explain what that is. External sources basically is grants, just been given the money. And then our own resources is basically capital reserves that we built up and any capital receipts that we've had. And then the rest is funded from debt, which is the balance there. Then table 3 on the same page, talking about replacing debt finance. And basically that's kind of repaying your mortgage kind of thing through the minimum revenue provision that hits revenue every year. And so that reduces your borrowing every year as you pay back. Table 4 then on page 124. There's a thing called the capital financing requirements, and anyway, that basically what it is, it's capital spend that you've not yet funded. So it's just basically you need to borrow stuff. So on the cash basis is a lower figure, but the IFRS base is a bit of a technical thing. There, you're also bringing in not only your normal borrowing, but also lease liabilities for finance leases and things like that. So, like the PFI schools or Coed Pella, there's a liability on the balance sheet, and that also gets included then as part of the capital financing requirement, because that's a commitment to pay future rent. Then, if you could then turn to page 125, please, on table 5, that just shows you what debt we've got, including the PFI and the leases, and it shows you how that debt compares to the gross capital financing requirement. So you can see next year we're projecting it to be under. And I also wanted to mention in that table there that that table and the table after, where it's got commas there, they should all be full stops, because I'm not talking about 256 billion there, but it's 256 million if you got to here. So that needs changing, please. There should be full stops, not commas. So don't be alarmed by that. Right. Okay, table 7 then on page 126. This is where we calculate a thing called an operational boundary and an authorized limit. The operational boundary really is a boundary that we shouldn't go through in terms of our borrowing. It kind of sets a limit on our borrowing. And the authorized limit then is 10 million more than that, and you mustn't go through your authorized limit. So there's a 10 million buffer there, just in case something unforeseen happens. And as Gareth referred to earlier, you'll see that from 23-24 to 24-25 for the PFI and leases bit, it jumps from 44 to 56. And that's because there's a change coming as a result of IFRS 16, where in the old days, it was only a finance lease that you had to put the asset on the balance sheet with liability. But now you have to do that with all leases. And so that's basically increased our need to have a higher limit next year, because when we calculate our actual borrowing, we'll have to include those other things that aren't currently included. So if we didn't adjust that, then we would be through our limit, which is not a good thing. Okay. And then, yeah, on page 128, table 9, this is the table that Gareth was referring to, where I've broken it down a bit more into detail. So you can see the first row is your general capital financing costs. That's your normal treasury stuff. We then have to rebadge the PFI, Coed Pella finance lease rentals as MRP and interest and stuff as well. So that then gets included there. And then also we've taken off the crump funding there for Ross-on-Sea and Penryn Bay. So that reduces there. So you can see then you kind of get to a net figure, and then that shows the proportion of the capital financing on a net basis to the revenue stream. So next year we're saying it's about 5.9%. Okay. And then I'll just quickly, if you're still with me, talk about Appendix B. If you could zoom down to page 130, please, page 130. There's a table 1. That just quickly shows you that the borrowing at the end of January was, we borrowed about 179 million, and we had about 17 million invested. That's just a bit of information there. And then if we then go down to page 133, there's some treasury management and prudential indicators, page 133. And these are about investments, really. So what we're saying in that first little 1 table is that at the end of this year, we won't have any more than 30 million invested beyond the year end, and all that 30 million will mature next year. And so we're saying really that 30 million is the most it'll be at the end of this year, and it'll all disappear during the next sort of financial year, and then it won't be there after that. But obviously, we'll be doing new investments and stuff. So yeah, that's investment, sorry. And then we have to set a limit as to what's our kind of average weight, value. Was it? There's like an weighted average credit rating, and we're saying we don't want that to be any less than A-, and so that's our kind of lowest target there. And then also liquidity, we just want to make sure that really we want to have at least 20 million available to us as kind of fairly liquid within 3 months, because we don't want to tie up our money too long, because if we needed it quicker, we'd have to borrow maybe. But what we're saying is let's always have at least 20 million available within 3 months. And finally, you might be glad to hear, table 4 on page 134, that again shows, it explains basically that graph that you're familiar with, the liability benchmark graph, and it shows really that there's a capital financing requirement, which is kind of your borrowing need. Then you can take off that your balance sheet resources, because any balance sheet resources you might have means you don't have to borrow. That gives you net loans requirement, which is the other line. And then we add in 10 million just for liquidity allowances, just to kind of give us a bit of a buffer there. And so anyway, though, that table 4 explains how the liability benchmark works on the following table. So that's I think that's all I want to say, really. I hope you followed some of that. And yeah, it's been a bit of a long morning, but you know, I thought it was important to go through those figures, really.
Okay, thank you, Hugh. Are you going to be saying anything about investment strategy and?
Well,
do you want to take one at a time?
I think that's all I want to say about basically the 3 strategies together, and then I think Appendix C, the investment strategy, is sort of fairly self-explanatory, and we're running out of time. So I think I'm happy just to say that and take any questions out, if that's okay.
Councillor Paul. I think you're on mute, Councillor Paul.
Sorry, Hugh.
That's okay.
On the liquidity allowance of 10 million, that seems static over not only over the years. It doesn't sort of increase with inflation, if you like, so I'm just want to fully understand your thinking about that 10 million figure and how you reach that 10 million figure, and why it doesn't go up in subsequent years as borrowings become greater.
So just trying to find where you are. Which was it, on the Appendix B, was it?
Yeah, it's that figure that you've got in 10 million going across.
Which table number, sorry?
Table 4, liability benchmark.
Right, yeah.
And basically, you've recorded in that table 10 million figure over that whole period, and I'm just raising the question: how do you reach that 10 million figure, and then does it need to go up in subsequent years?
I mean, in a way, yeah. No, table 4 isn't kind of a limit as such. It's kind of calculating your different kind of borrowing requirements and stuff. And so there's a thing called a net loans requirement, which is your loan CFR, but reduced by your balance sheet resources. And what we're saying is that's called the net loans requirement. Then, yeah, obviously, yeah, you add on to that the liability, the liquidity allowance to give you a liability benchmark. And yeah, we could have added 1 million per annum. You know, that would be fine. We would just kind of change the graph a little bit. It's only kind of a graph for illustrative purposes, really. That's not setting that in stone, really. It's just, you know.
So you each year you have flexibility on that, you're saying?
Yeah, it's kind of at the moment this kind of these reports really are sort of setting the scene for next year, if you like. So that for 24-25. These are all targets that we have got to keep to and stuff. But in a way, for the following years, you know, we reset it every year, as you know. So it's kind of not as crucial. So we could add a 1 or a 2 the year after, whatever. So it's not a target, that really, almost, that table. It's just like a benchmark, and we report that in the quarterly things anyway. We could change it then, even, you know. So
thank you for explaining.
Okay.
Nigel, you have a question?
Yeah, through you, Chair. Quick 3. Training, excellent. More of the same, please. Gareth. Second question is capital strategy, localizing it, personalizing it. Great. Can we know back when? Maybe an amended response on that. And the third one is treasury management. The use of terminology. I sense that in a room of 50 people, you'd ask 50 people what they thought treasury management was about as a term. I think that you'd struggle to get consistency. Can you look at whether you can either use alternative wording or a subheading to explain the link in terms of funding, how to fund the council's capital programme or other such stuff? Because I'm trying to get the psychological link when looking at this in terms of something that is meaningful in terms of the decisions that are being made by the council, rather than the term treasury management, which I don't think necessarily hits where we want it to hit. Just a thought.
Thank you, Nigel. Gareth, any response to that?
Well, yeah, I guess. Well, there was three things really. When I think the first one, pleased that the training was so well received and that members found it useful. So that's good, and it will, like I said earlier, it will be something that quite possibly not Christmas week, maybe a week or two earlier might be of more benefit to members, but certainly in this kind of cycle when we're looking at the strategy not that long after, I think is the right time to have it. In terms of the capital strategy, I think it's something that was highlighted to a degree in the peer review, so it is in the action plan there. I think there's some other factors that are going to come into it. One will be capacity, which obviously is challenging with the competing demands at the minute. And the other, I guess, is the availability of some of the other things that for me need to link with it. Things like an asset management strategy, which hopefully is going to be something that we develop to greater effect than we currently have when the new head of housing strategy starts, which I think might be this week or next week. And I'm sure that will be something that's high on her agenda. But I think for me, it was giving it quite a bit of thought over the weekend, really, in terms of what kind of things we pull in. Because obviously at the moment, our position is feels very much on the back foot, really, given the revenue position that we're in, and it's almost that's driving our capital, as well as the decisions that we've made in the past on capital and trying to rein it back in a little bit, like Amanda mentioned earlier. So there's a range of things like, for me, I think we need to, as Hugh said, we need to be projecting and taking that longer term view. And when I say that, I mean, probably minimum 10 years really, and setting out what it is, linking in with the corporate plan. So it's probably, to do it properly, is probably quite a big piece of work. So I'm not going to get pinned down today on a particular date, but it is something that is on our radar. I think it's important that we do it properly, Nigel, and I'm sure you'd agree with that, rather than it just being a tick in the box thing. I think if we're going to do it and deviate away from this, because like you said, these are fully compliant strategies that we're using, but they are templates, and for smaller bodies like ourselves who aren't doing anything particularly complex or risky or anything like that, it is, we haven't got commercial assets that we invest. We've got none of that stuff going on, or credit default swaps. It's very straightforward, really, what we're doing, and we're just, we haven't got a lot of money, so we need to make sure we look after what we do have. But I think we need to pull all those other elements into it and do it justice still. So we, and have that, rather than it being an off-the-shelf version that we just drop figures into. I would like to make it more meaningful as a document. And it is difficult to predict the future, certainly in terms of funding at the moment. We know how challenging that is, and the landscape that we're operating in. But I think the peer review highlighted something that, to be fair, we did know, but it's going to take a bit of time to develop it and take it through that process with members as well, making sure members are comfortable with it. The third point was around the link, wasn't it, in terms of terminology? Terminology, in fairness, is well versed and is normal terminology. But I do hear what you're saying. One of the reasons I put the glossary in there is because there's a lot of complex terms that are referred to. There's acronyms, there's words that will come up just in a report every quarter, and it's not always that clear to officers as well as members, in all honesty, around what some of those things mean. And some of them probably is stuff that we're not doing, and maybe we could look at refining even the glossary. But I think in terms of maybe an introductory paragraph that pulls together and maybe clarifies how it all knits together in terms of the capital and the treasury side of it. Yeah, we can by all means take a look at that for you and something more meaningful, or that helps, I guess, give that high level overview of what it is we're doing before then going into the nitty gritty of it.
Okay, thank you, Gareth. I would certainly support that, although I, as I've mentioned to you last week, I think we are making progress in terms of the presentation of these documents and the clarity, and Nigel's suggestions will only help to make it even better. But we've certainly moved on, I think, quite a bit compared to a number of years ago. So thank you for that, and thank you, Hugh.
Thank you.
So as a governance and audit committee, we are being asked to approve 3 key items, which is the capital strategy in Appendix A, the treasury management strategy and prudential indicators, which were in Appendix B, and the investment strategy, which was in Appendix C. So if we don't have any other questions, please can I ask for a proposer? Oh, sorry.
Does Gareth want to come in again?
So Gareth,
Yeah,
you have your hand up?
Yeah, just to make it clear,
I think so.
It's council that actually approve the documents. The recommendation from the Governance and Audit Committee is that the strategies are reviewed to provide assurance as to the content and make recommendations to council rather than actually approving the documents. It has to be a council decision.
Yeah, okay. Thank you for that. I'm perhaps in that case blindly following the notes that I've been provided with. So you're saying we note it and support it, but we do not approve.
Yeah, it's 2.1 in the report.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. On that basis, please can I ask for a proposer? Thank you, Nigel, and a seconder, Councillor Dilwyn, and a show of hands, please. Does everyone support?
It's unanimous, Chair.
Is anyone? Oh, okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. And finally, it's item 10A, the external regulatory reports. And thank you for your patience, Amanda. Over to you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for inviting me this afternoon to present the most recent external audit reports and accompanying action plans that we've received from our external regulators. So the report starts on page 145, and you can see listed there the 4 audit reports that are included within the agenda pack. They are, other than the last one, they are all national reports. So we have a missed opportunity social enterprise. A summary of that is on page 147. So that report or that study, that national study, was actually carried out in early 2022. And we received the final report last January. It has taken some time for us to consider the recommendations for that that came out of that audit, and we've been busy undertaking a gap analysis, and that's why there's it's been quite a bit of time before it coming here before you again today. So the actual action plan responding to the recommendations from that audit was brought in front of this committee in September. But what we're bringing back to you today was the action plan as a result of the gap analysis, because the gap analysis was one of the recommendations that came out of that audit. So we pulled together a group of officers from across the organisation and actually completed that gap analysis. and you'll find the action plan responding to that gap analysis is on page 153. So just to clarify why that's taken a bit of time, because as you'll appreciate, officers have got are very busy with lots of other things. So it was just trying to fit in doing completing this gap analysis alongside doing everything else that they've got to do. In terms of the second report, Together We Can, Community Resilience and Self-Reliance. The site work took place again in 2022, and the final report was received around about the same time as the social enterprise audit report. So again, one of the recommendations was around completing a gap analysis. So we've been busy doing that piece of work as well. So you'll find the action plan responding to the recommendations is on page 154. And the action plan that has come out of the gap analysis responding to that recommendation is on page 156. Just moving further down, the third audit report, again, was a national report around digital inclusion in Wales. And on page 148, there are some findings listed there, some high-level findings that report concluded. There were no formal recommendations that came out of that audit, but there are some key questions that local authorities have been asked to consider, and there is a link to those key questions on page 149. Those questions have been considered and are being considered as part of delivery of our digital strategy, so they will be considered as part of incorporated into the work that we're doing to deliver our digital strategy, which does look at digital inclusion as well. In terms of the fourth audit report, this was an inspection of education, training and employment services in youth offending teams in England and Wales. And there are some strengths listed there and some areas for improvement that were identified as part of that inspection. So they're on page 149. The action plan responding to that is on page 157, and you'll see from that action plan that all of the recommendations have been implemented. They are now part of business as usual. So those are the four audit reports and subsequent action plans that are being presented to you today. I'd just like to draw your attention to its paragraphs 1.3 and 1.4, which are on page 146. So paragraph 1.3 sets out that from May, external audit reports and the action plans will be shared with the relevant overview and scrutiny committee. That is because scrutiny have a role in quality assuring action plans responding to audit recommendations. So it is included within their terms of reference. They are required to do that. So we will be taking audit action plans through the relevant scrutiny committee for them to be quality assured there. Rest assured, this committee, you will still receive copies of the audit reports when they are published, so you will receive them in a timely fashion. And then what we will do is, in accordance with the terms of reference and the legislation in terms of this committee, every 6 months we will be bringing progress updates, as we do now, on all audit recommendations. So just to draw your attention to that slight change that's happening within the process, just to further strengthen our governance and our quality assurance processes in terms of audit recommendations. So I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Amanda. Does anyone have any questions for Amanda? No.
No, Chair, I can't
It
see any
seems not.
hands.
No hands. Yeah. Okay, so we as a committee have been asked to consider the reports, the action plans, and respond to recommendations and proposals for improvement. As there are no questions, please can I ask for a proposer in support? Thank you, Councillor Dolan. And a seconder. Thank you, Councillor John. And a show of hands, please. I think that's unanimous. So thank you once again, Amanda. And as I mentioned last week, I think that definitely this approach of ensuring that the reports are issued to us well in advance, and then we just have a summary to read prior to the committee meeting, makes it easier to work through, and it's less daunting 1 week before the meeting. And it's very helpful to have that clarity in seeing the action plans. So thanks for that. And to those of you who are left on the call, please can I thank you for your contributions, for the debate, and for your patience and resilience as we work through the agenda. So thank you, everyone, and have a good rest of the week.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, members.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, Jane, for your support.
You're welcome. Nice to meet you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. I'll go and open my curtains again now.
Yeah, you can now.